Okay, it's 9 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. This is an administrative hearing being held on December 11th, 2024 in the Whitley County Government Center in the County Commissioner, County Council meeting room. This hearing is being recorded. This hearing is being conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as found in IC 6-1.1-1-1. The following persons are representing the PTABOA Board, Property Tax Assessment Board of Appeals: Greg Fall, Jeff Walker, Teresa Sedaris. The following persons are representing the Whitley County Assessor's Office: Josh Pettit on behalf of the Whitley County Assessor's Office and Kimberly, the Whitley County Assessor. Will all persons who are or may be witnesses in this hearing raise your right hand to be sworn in?
Hang on, is this for him?
Yes, I'm sorry,
yeah,
the first
you
one.
gotta introduce him too.
Yeah, Mr. Childers, sorry, Mr. Childers. you're
Mention
gonna
that who's here for the test.
Yeah, Mr. Childers is gonna be our first appeal this morning.
And you can step up here if you want, yeah, and we'll swear you in also. It's not nearly as formal as this all makes it sound,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, okay. The following persons, I already read this, so do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes, I do.
I do. Okay, we have appeal for Tom Childers, petition 92-01-21-0-5-0012. We have 3 of them, actually. That one is for 2021. 92-011-22-0-5-0010, and that's for 2022. 92-01-23-0-5-0013-2023. This is parcel number 92-03-12-318-002, period, 000-011. Property location of 2979 East Colony Avenue in Columbia City, Indiana. And Mr. Childers, I'll let you go first. If you want to speak first, please.
Well, I guess in some ways I'd rather answer questions. I mean, but my presentation gets down to this.
Yeah, if it would help, do you want me just to surmise a little bit of why you're here, just to
Sure,
save
that'd be
you
great. That'd be great.
So what we have is we have a property on the lake on Colony, and it stems around whether or not the taxpayer has a residence on the property. We have to start there because he's been denied his homestead for years, correct?
2014. Yep.
Yeah, so he started back in 2014, and you fill in the details as I just say blanket statements, but started back in 2014 filing.
Right.
What we had it on is a shed, so it kept getting denied. The auditor kept denying it because there wasn't a home, there wasn't a home, there wasn't a home. What's happened, I think, in the near past is there was a new law, a new court case that changed what constitutes part of your homestead, right? So for years, your homestead was your house, one other structure, and an acre of ground. Well, there was a court decision that basically said, well, your homestead is anything you're using as your homestead, so it could encompass the major case in Indianapolis, encompass even like a carriage house and things like that. And so now they're even saying the new language kind of says curtilage, which is a fancy term to say everything that's kind of encompassed by your homestead, right? So in my case, it would be I have a detached garage and an attached garage, but it's all residential. It's all part of my home, right? They would give me all of that. So there was so that case came down, and because of that case, then there was a window that was opened up for people to go back. So what he really has is he kind of has these correct the error that's been made. That's why there's 3 years. So because you can go back 6 tax installments on correction of errors, even though they're the same form. The correction side goes back that far. So I'm stating everything correctly so far, right? Okay.
100%.
All right. So the county may argue different than the taxpayer on what needs to happen here, but I wanted to at least get you guys the base. Like that was a really abridged version because he's been dealing with this for a long time. Okay, so that's the really abridged version of he's here now, and I'll let you go ahead and say what are you asking for like. Now you can talk to them. I'm just some guy over here.
I'm asking you to follow your Pledge of Allegiance where you said you don't enforce more taxes than necessary. That's what I'm here for. Like I said, in 2014, when I first tried to get the homestead, the girl said, You're at 3139. My dad had the same name, so they denied me for that. Then they said there had to be a home. And when you look at the homestead deductions, as you said, case law has shown, it doesn't have to be a home. It can be a garage. The form says it can be a garage. All it has to be is when I called Jenny Banks, she is supposedly the state expert who gets the homestead credit. And in the end, it's gonna go to them if you guys decide against me. If you don't think the law has changed, that's the next step. It goes to them, and then I can actually get a lawyer and then go in that further step if they disagree. But in the end, what I'm hoping you do is open your mind to somebody like me who had a fight with the sewer board years ago because they didn't want to put the pit close to me. They didn't want to put it at a reasonable place. They doubled the price to me. They tripled the price when I had to so I didn't want to hook it up to them until I had to, and that's pretty much what I did. I love the property. I love Whitley County. I think Whitley County needs to change somewhat in a minimum. What is a house? What's a home? Indiana has an Indian log cabin rule, but in the end, my residence has been there for quite a while. It's been on my address. I've had a mailbox there. It's been on my license. In the end, it doesn't have to be a home to get the homestead credit. That's what we want here. And I'd like to quit fighting with Whitley County, and in the end, try to get Whitley County more open-minded with taxes, what an older gentleman can afford to build. It's even like when I finally did build, I just wanted to finish the upper. I wanted to do 770 some square feet. The builder goes in and says, nope, you gotta do 1,000. So the builder on the fly changed it to 1,000. Well, when he did that, that's when I had to put a basement down in the restroom, and that's when it brought up that old fight about I wanted to pit close stuff that gravity would work, that I don't have to rely on electricity for my sewage to get out of the house. So in the end, there's a lot of reasons why I'm here today, but mainly it saves as much money as I can and keep someone like me in the future when they go to apply for the homestead, the person says, well, there's not a home. There doesn't have to be a home. I don't think there ever did, or I don't know exactly when the law changed, but from my perspective, it's been quite a while that I should have been having to have that homestead credit. Otherwise, I've been paying $1,000 for a piece of ground, and then I'm going to ask you guys how many other 1-acre lots in Whitley County get charged $1,000 a year.
So yeah, from all of my research, and there's actually two issues. The one issue is one I don't even know if Kim has ever talked to you about, because I was just discussing it with one of our attorneys yesterday. So I apologize. It's been all of maybe 10 hours, 12 hours since I talked to him about this. Maybe a little longer now. It's a little early, but so the legal process of this is when he was denied a homestead, the first time or the last time, the homestead is something that's subjective. So there's two parts of this form. There used to be two forms. There used to be a 130 and a 133. 133 was a correction of error. 130 was an appeal on your property value, we'll say. And so one was always known as a subjective thing. The other one was objective. So if I had your garage too big, you could file and be like, hey, my garage is only 500 square foot and you have me down as a 625 square foot garage. It's too big, right? So we had a bad measurement, something like that. You could have a mathematical error where the computer system somehow is adding 2 plus 2 and getting 5, right? And if you could show that, then you could be like, well, this whole thing's an error. A lot of times we'd have a double assessment would happen with, say, an annually assessed mobile home got converted to real estate. Well, one is taxed in its first year, the other one's taxed a year in arrears. And that has happened. People have gotten taxed on the same property twice. That's an error. It has to be corrected, right? So there's all these things. Missing an exemption is something that can be corrected if they filed and the auditor just didn't give it to them, right? Or whatever the case might be. In the case of whether or not a home, even if he had a full, like his current home that he has built, I was out there, by the way, measured house, lovely, right? It's much probably better than what you're like, hey, I like this house, right? But
wish I hadn't bought years ago, honestly, but I can't
yeah, no. And so even if it has a home, like even if it's one of your homes, whether or not you get a homestead is not an objectable thing. It's a subjective thing. The auditor can look at that and say you don't qualify for whatever reason, right? And as soon as there's a qualifier, as to whether or not you get it. It becomes something that you can file an appeal on, but it's an objectable issue, not a subjective issue, or it's a subjective issue, not an objective issue, which means the trigger that starts that is when you're denied, your first notice of being denied, you have 45 days to file. So our biggest issue on this whole thing is this is technically not timely filed for any purpose. Going back doesn't even exist because we know the old ones didn't have a filing on them, because this is the first time it was filed, would be this November date of this year. So what the Schiffler case allowed, which is the one we're referring to when they changed this curtilage language and they kind of used the word primary residence instead of, assessors always use the word dwelling. They're kind of synonymous, but the language did change slightly to primary residence. The law was opened up to go back and fix those, but you can only fix something that you already had. So if somebody had a homestead and they weren't getting the proper amount of homestead because it wasn't including their detached garage or their pool or whatever might have been included, the legislators opened up this window to file and go back on those things. But it would kind of be like going back and asking for your home to be reduced before your home was built. Right, that's where we're at right now. There's no homestead to actually correct the value of what's being homesteaded in the past. And that actually is still the case for 2023, because in 2024, he has a house and he's getting a homestead. I believe you've been granted your homestead going forward, correct? That is.
Well, I mean, once again, what we should have just kicked in 2023. You know, when exactly was it a home? And I mean, or what you call a home?
Right. No, and I understand. You're going to be very frustrated with what I'm telling you and the board, and that is when you were denied in 23, it triggered a window to appeal this. By the time you got the information you wanted, it was 16 months later or 18 months later. It was not 40. It was not within 45 days. That's not necessarily your fault, but at the same time, the most recent denial was back in like the summer of 23, and by the time it was filed, we're in November of 24.
All right, and I'm fine with you saying that. Now, in the end, that to me is the assessor / being incompetent, not doing the exact same pledge that you, the assessor job or the auditor, and it seems like I've bounced back and forth between both departments at times.
Yeah,
their job is to inform me what I need to do as a resident to pay the proper amount of tax, not the minimum, not the proper. And they didn't say, hey, we disagree because we don't think that's a home, which it never had to be a home anyway. You look at the form and
yeah, and if we have to get into that argument, I think we would also disagree that, you know, from to protect Kim a little bit, she's doing whatever, when it comes to what a home is, she's doing whatever Whitley County calls a home, right? So there's some size requirements. There's also, you know, like, to go to the absurd, right? We wouldn't be allowed to call somebody's tent a home, right? They wouldn't allow that. They probably wouldn't allow an RV to be a home because it's not attached to property, right? So there's all kinds of things that, as of right now, to get into that side of things, Whitley County, there's multiple emails to multiple department heads, and there's even stuff from the sewer district in the past that says we would not allow this to be a residence. So I do agree that he called the state. He did talk to Jenny. The problem is Jenny doesn't know this case. And Jenny is right. If it's your primary residence, you should file. But she has to have that if in there. There's no way that Jenny Banks is on the record as saying the state thinks your property is a primary residence. She would say, if it's a primary residence, you should get the deduction.
Her questions to me were very specific. Was there a structure on the property? Structure. Were they taxing you on? Did you own any other property? Those were the three questions Jenny had for me. She said, do you have paperwork that proves that you applied for that homestead credit? Because they can go back 3 years and credit it.
Yep, and yes, I agree with all that.
She didn't say you have to file appeal within 45 days and you're out of the luck. And what she said was, and that's probably where it sounds like where we're going to go, is that if the board turns me down here, if you don't agree that things I was not handled properly, it's going to go to the state. I mean, that's where it's going to go. And then the state's going to say, well, was the auditor proper with how they told me that, hey, we don't think it's a home, or what we think is a home is not, your home.
Right, and I can appreciate that, and I don't want to force you to go to the state, although I think that, that was where we would, I'm excluding them, they're their own partial thing, We would probably say, unfortunately, that's where we think you need to go, because what we don't want the board to do is say, the timelines don't matter, because then anyone in this county who's ever been denied a homestead could go back and be like, I want to fight my homestead, right? And there has to be some sort of statute of limitations on when you can file these things.
If they were
And that's
given
the problem,
this information like me, I would call this, then I think they should be allowed, because they've been overpaying. And it gets back, they even said that, like, out-of-state residents get the homestead, right? People in nursing homes get the homestead.
And I hear what you're saying, but I really do I don't like the situation you're in. So please understand, I'm trying to have some empathy in this process. That I don't love the situation that you found yourself in. The problem you're going to run into from the county's perspective is that those deadlines and those things are in the public forum. Now, did the auditor, when they sent a denial or when they denied it, did they send you a form that says your next step, if you disagree, is XYZ? Probably not. Does it still exist? Yes. And so that's kind of one of those things that if I'm speeding down the highway and the cop pulls me over and I said, well, I didn't know it was 55 here. I thought it was, you know what I mean? They'd be like, well, that's not our problem, right? I don't want to sound harsh. It's not our problem. I really would prefer someone higher up than the county to go against what we believe the law is, right? Like we don't want to overstep that law.
And I guess
to a degree.
Response to what they said, and what's going to use auditor or assessor?
As assessor,
Okay.
yeah.
And the auditor's
She actually has very little to do with this. It's actually an auditor case is really what's going on, right? But,
right.
But the auditor's not going to be here
Right.
because it's not, we didn't even bring up this question of whether or not you are allowed to have the homestead because it's past the denial. Because there are sometimes homesteads that come before the board that are denied and then they file to get it, and then sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, right? It's an argument at that point about, was it timely filed? Are you allowed to have it? Do you just have one? Blah, 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 right? So.
And when I was up in the auditor's office, they actually showed me, well, we sent you this little card. This little card, it's like an orange color, and on the card, hopefully it said, if you disagree with this, but I don't remember ever seeing a card saying.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what
and what's going to.
You'd be surprised how much we don't know what the auditors do, right? We're
Right.
so value driven. We deal with the value of the property. We
Right.
don't deal with the
And
exemption side.
And all I know is from like the taxpayers. And another example is like the $70 fee you hit me for recycling, but then you don't bring the container. I mean, it's little things like that.
Yeah, you've got lots of
record,
little.
that's not us.
Yes. It sounds like you have lots of little issues that have come up with the sewer, with now
I own the
I get
road.
it.
Do you want me to park my junk vehicles on the road and block the road? I mean, I have lots of issues with,
Right.
this property and with Whitley County. But I love Whitley County. I love that home. I don't want
Right.
to fight. I'm tired of fighting. I'm old and I'm tired of fighting.
So Tom, where I'm struggling to try to reconcile this is that you're claiming that this shed was a primary residence. In my mind, because of the information that we've gotten from the building department, the health department, the sewer district, all that correspondence, and then my own common sense is that you have to have it a livable dwelling, water and sewer services. Because of state law, ordinances, and I recognize that like an RV, you can have containerized facilities for both those. Did you have either of those as a part of your?
No, my sister owns the next door property, so if I ever needed to use those facilities, I use Sissy's house. Now, but in the end, once again, see, I don't think that, and you guys, maybe that's what the county's gonna argue, that's what it has to be, but the state didn't ask me that. The state asked was their structure when they're taxing on you.
And in all fairness, we're first, and then if there's an appeal, then it goes to the state, not the other way around. So I appreciate that you corresponded with the state.
Right.
But for my side of it, I don't care about that at this point, because that would be a next step rather than them and then us. So,
Partly, I'm gonna go back to, you know, and my son, Harvard graduate, right, says, Dad, don't let him get you mad. You know, and then I read that.
I don't wanna get
First
you
person
mad.
to get you mad.
That's
loses.
good. That's good advice, right?
Oh,
You
it
gotta
is,
check
it
your
is,
you
yeah.
gotta check your
But then-
emotion at the door. It's tough sometimes.
But then I read that, all the thing about the sewer, the main reason I didn't hook up was that whole sewer fight. Once again, it gets back to, Mom paid $2,000 to hook up, and $20 a month. I go to hook up a couple years later, they want $5,000 a month, $5,000 to hook up at 40. And then they wanna put the pit $7,000 away from where, mainly because I think I made Cliff mad years ago. I mean, because I'm right by that building that smells and that they said they would fix and all. So I've had fights with Whitley for years. And so there is anger, there is emotion. I want you to help the old guy like me, the next one coming in. Give them, if they have a structure, if they're follow state law. It's not Whitley County law. And there's a small, what you think of a home and what I think of a home are two different things. And old guy on Social Security might think of a home different from what you guys think of a home.
Yeah.
But there does not have to be, for my feeling, in state law, following the state homestead credit, because homestead's kind of like the old days where you had a house, grandma and grandpa, they didn't have indoor plumbing, you didn't need it. You know, that was what the outhouse was for. Homestead's for that, so you can buy a piece of property, you can develop it on your timetable when you can afford it, and when you don't have, you know, other miscellaneous things taking your
yeah,
time.
luckily, those laws have changed to the point that it'll benefit not only the property owners, but our environment by getting rid of outhouses and doing the regional sewer districts if municipal's not available. So in that point,
I agree, but at that point, somebody needs to help oversee that sewer district, because when you halt that one person off and then.
well,
and then they say,
they've
well,
got
nobody-
reporting requirements to the state too, Tom.
Yeah, and that was the only thing I could do in that fight. All I could do was go to like, you know, the accounting people. There was nobody, Whitley County didn't, as the building, had no power at all over that sewer, over the sewer.
Over the sewer.
So there was no, you know, point to go in and, hey, I'm reasonable on this one.
Yeah.
Let's find middle, because in the end, most people want middle ground. They want to be heard, they want fairness, they want equity. All I want is Indiana laws. This Indiana real estate laws. Whitley County can change them some, but not a lot, not a lot. I didn't, when I bought that piece of ground, I didn't buy it in the state of Whitley County. I bought it in Indiana.
Do you have the actual law in front of any of your paperwork? Yeah, because
All I've got really is the form, I think was what I was
you're
gonna
all right,
use
then. You're all
to,
right, then.
you know, but I've looked up the law and the whole of the
well,
dwelling and.
more so like what the law like. I'll be honest, I'm not an attorney. I haven't memorized these laws. Every time a law comes up, I'm always like, I don't even know which law this is now anymore. But I refer to an attorney to try to tell me what the law is. But
And my point to all of it is you want people to develop property in Whitley County. That's how your tax revenues. So you want to keep things affordable, whether it's a sewer. You want guys like me to end up building. I'm glad I built, but I had to build when I could afford to. I couldn't build when just, and part of, the main reason I'm here, I had no idea they were taxing mine. My old foundation that was from the Girl Scout camp, they called that a patio. If you look up the definition of patio, it's a structure around a home. You know, so at times Whitley County was calling it a home, calling it, you know, using the word verbiage to charge me taxes. And at other times they weren't allowing that, the one big credit that there is.
so I will tell you, I don't think this form was updated 123. But it still has some language about this whole up to 1 acre. So I don't know if they have updated this form or not. But it does say under definitions on the homestead standard deduction, and if you guys want to jot this down, it's IC code 6-1.1-12-37. So we might have to look that up also, although I feel like they're probably putting it all here. It does go into definition. Homestead means an individual's principal place of residence. 1, that is located in Indiana. 2, that an individual owns, and it goes through A, B, C, D, and E, which basically qualifies what is considered ownership, right? So you can be part of a, part of under contract, you can own it outright, you can, be a vested interest, blah, 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 right? So it's giving you 5 different ways of you can own it. Point 3 is that consists of a dwelling and the real estate up to 1 acre that immediately surrounds that dwelling. That's my concern. It does say dwelling there, but it also has the old language about up to 1 acre, which has now been defunct from the Schiffler case, right? So I don't know if they prescribed a new form or not. I doubt it, right? But I do know that, because then it does go on to the definition of dwelling means any of the following. So I didn't read this part yet, so maybe this will help us out. A residential real property improvement that an individual uses as the individual's residence, including a house or garage. A mobile home that is not assessed as real property that the individual uses as the individual's residence, or a manufactured home, etc. So qualify. Then it goes into who qualifies, but I don't think that's really imperative here. So I do think it's interesting they say a house or garage, not a house and garage. I was expecting that word to be and there. So, yeah. So I think in the spirit of things, I think he's on the right track, right? If a garage can be, what else can be, right? I do think the county has some rules about what a dwelling is. And unfortunately, even though I've now read that, and I might be helping his case a little bit, I think the bigger issue is whether or not it's even timely filed, which is the worst part of this argument against you, right, that I'm making, is that I don't know if any of this is even timely filed. And if it's not timely filed, which is my number one argument, because that's if we can't get past that, then everything else doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a dwelling or if it's a residence or what's included or not included. If he was denied a homestead, then there's nothing to homestead. And that denial is something that is subjective. And if it's subjective, it's a 45-day window to appeal it. So I won't continue to harp on that. You guys know how I feel about that. You know that that's the argument. I think you guys have to deliberate and either check that box or disagree. And if you disagree that it can be heard here, then we go into all the things that he's mentioned. We go into what the homestead deduction says. You guys decide if it qualifies. If you guys think it's timely filed or it qualifies to be filed, and you think his residence is there and qualifies for the homestead, then I would say you should give it to him, right? If you check this box and this box and this box, the answer is, it's just a form at that point, yes. If any of those say no, it's no, right? So you guys have a tough decision here, because you got to make a decision on whether or not it's even allowed to be. He's allowed to be here, right? The question is, it's the same thing as if the next taxpayer came up and had filed not by June 15th, but filed by July 15th, I wouldn't even have evidence. I'd just be like, it's not timely filed. You know what I mean? And I'd rest my case at that point.
And I think that document that I have, and that was what Jenny asked me, do you have paperwork proving that you applied for it? And that's one of my 2017, and thank God I saved papers, so I could find them. So.
Yeah, and I'm giving Jenny a little bit of an out, right? Because the state almost 100%, every time they ever answer, will give them a vague answer that indemnifies them from being wrong, right? So I'm not going to try to figure out exactly what Jenny and you said in the exact conversation. But I will tell you that I guarantee if right now we had Jenny on the phone, she'd be like, I don't really know what's going on. I don't want to be a part of this. You know what I mean? She'd be like, you guys figure it out, and if he files to the state, maybe we get involved. But you know what I mean? Like at that point, she's gonna deny that. She's like, well, I remember talking to someone about a homestead, and I just told him if it's primary residence, you file. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna protect Jenny there also in the fact that They get so many phone calls.
Yeah,
She probably has, she won't know who.
Oh, she remember,
Yeah.
I'm an Indiana retiree, so I think she'll remember me.
She might remember you, yeah.
And I think she'd remember the conversation. I asked Kim to call her, you know, because in the end, I like to save my time and money and fight, you know, why fight with these people if she
Yeah.
can just get it
Yeah.
done for me? I'd rather just get it done. Yeah.
I have a question for Josh. Just so I am clear, there are really two legal or statutory issues here. The one is once the law was changed, the homestead, then how do I phrase this? My
Was
second,
expanded. Think of it that way. It was
Okay.
expanded when the Schiffler case came down.
but in order to claim that or go backwards, you had to have met the criteria. So is there two issues, the issue with the change to the statute and the filing, or are those the same issue?
No, I think there's two issues. One
Okay.
is he was denied a homestead to begin with. The question is, can he appeal that denial today? The second one is, the other issue you're referring to with that change with Schiffler is everyone that was getting a homestead was being limited to their home, their 1 acre, up to 1 acre, and they could have a detached garage extra building, right? So it's basically their house and their garage. Think of it that way. It was their house, your garage, and your 1 acre, up to 1 acre. That was the law of the land forever. The courts decided that's not actually the law. The law doesn't say that it's limited to these things. It's just that it is your homestead, your primary residence, right? So we wouldn't include if you had a commercial business on your property, that part would be excluded. If you had a rental unit on your property, that would be, because it's not part of your primary residence, right? But everything else, almost without, is that where we're at now, right? Almost everything on a residential property is getting the homestead now. So that was giving them a bigger deduction, right? More stuff at cap 1. But in order to have that, you had to have already been granted, to go back on these back
my
years, right? Because
question.
he does have 3 appeals,
Okay.
so kind of these back years. And we're gonna say all 3 of them are technically back years. You have to have, because the only current thing we'd be dealing with, if it was a current appeal, would be 24. And that would be something he's already, like, he'll be taxed on that next year, and that's his home, and he's already been given a homestead. So the 23, 22, and 21 are all technically in arrear, going backwards on what he's already paid taxes on. And therefore, the second legal argument would be, if you don't have a homestead, how can you expand that homestead to include anything that he owns on that property, right? And that's the issue, right? And we're saying, because he doesn't have a homestead, the proper timing to do that was within 45 days of that denial, which is all the way back in 2023.
Okay.
Because in 24 he was granted, so.
Didn't it take me more than 30 days, so just to get this meeting? I mean, Kim,
We
what?
have to give 30 days notice. by
So in some
statute.
ways you get 15. I mean,
No. I mean, even if you filed this form the day after you were denied, even if it took 6 months to have your hearing, that's not part of the time frame. It's when you file. So as long as you file timely, we would say everything is still in play, right? So as long as you again, I already told you, that's the part you're going to hate about my argument, is that this thing's not even a legally binding appeal because it's filed late.
Right.
Right. So, and that's, again,
I just filed late because I was never told I could file.
yeah, and
just
I,
got tired.
I understand.
Honestly, I got tired, and then
Yeah,
when I
that's-
tried to figure out what I'm gonna pay on this property, right? And they gave me it wasn't your office, auditors, $3,300. I thought, well, Mom's only $2,000. And Mom had a more valuable place, So how are mine? And then the next door neighbor printed out exactly what I was getting taxed on, and her calculations were $2,600, which is more reasonable in the end. But that's when I got mad, when I saw they're taxing me on that old little piece of crappy old cement from I mean, that's, and then anger, the good thing about anger, sometimes it motivates you to try to make a change. And in the end, I'm trying to make Whitley County better for everybody, not just me. So anyways, And if somebody, you know, a part of that better is I was a public servant. I expect my public servants to do the best for the public.
Yeah,
And
just,
give 'em
and just from an
accurate-
outsider's perspective, the change I would like, and this always seems to be when I'm recommending changes, always about notifying taxpayers, right? It's one of those things that says, I wish every single exemption, whether it's the homesteader or the over 65 or the veterans, if you're denied, I wish they would have and maybe they do, so I can't speak about the auditor. Do they send something to the taxpayer that says you were denied because of X, Y, or Z, and here is your recourse? Now, maybe that's on that card, right? I don't know, so I don't want to speak ill about what the auditor does. But it is nice when you're denied something, instead of just thinking it went through, you know, that there's something that tells the taxpayer what their next step is.
Since I'm 65, that brings up a great point, because I was wondering, Mom didn't get Mom was 80-something, didn't get it, because her place was worth more than $250.
Yeah.
So sometimes these brilliant legislatures, they think I pay my bills based on the net value, net worth of my property. I mean, it's ludicrous. So they give a senior supposedly a deduction of credit. No such thing. In the end, it's like this form, and what I want as the taxpayer is like for each one of those crappy little pieces of concrete or deck that I built, how much was that cost me a year? Because in the end, that's what I need is, because I'll rip it out. I've already ripped some out, but I need to know what exactly am I paying tax? And if I'm paying $70 for a recycling thing, I want them to deliver that. Or if you didn't give it to me this year, I want the $70 credit. I mean, I'm an old guy. I like to get value for what I'm paying for.
Right.
I will say, Tom, too, in notification that goes to our taxpayers in the form of the notice of assessments that we send, which is the Form 11, we're mandated to mail them by May 1st to give taxpayers an opportunity to appeal by June 15th of the same year the notice is given or issued in. The state of Indiana has just started giving us a format that we have to follow in the structure of the way that Form 11 has to be printed. We don't even get to dictate what we want on those Form 11s anymore. The state has stepped in and has given us the guideline, the size of font that can be used, the size that the boxes have to be, and what criteria can go in those boxes before we can even get approval from the state on those Form 11s. The TS1s that come in your tax bills from the auditor's office, the state dictates what can go on those TS1s as well as the format used on that TS1 and the tax bill itself. So we at the local level can't control what comes to you in the form of those notices. We don't get that option.
Kim, and I'm going to hit you a little bit. I guess back when all this happened, in 3300, Kim, why did I get assessed wrong, right? So I filled out the assessment form, right? I even mailed it because I knew I was going to be a day late on dropping it. But the mailbox rule says if I drop it in that letter in that mailbox, it's good that day,
Yep.
right? I dropped it in, you still then in your email said, nope, we're not going to relook it, because all I knew was I'm paying $3,300 and Mom paid $2 and Mom flew to
I don't review tax bills. That wouldn't have been me.
Well, the letter but you review when somebody has a problem with or the appraisal. The appraisal is what I was contesting. All I knew was something wrong. I know it's appraisal, why is
So in the past, you have filed a regular appeal on value.
Yeah, we made corrections
Okay.
for you, and you were filed timely. We went ahead and made corrections for you.
Right, but I did the values. I'll never understand really the 3,300. But in the end, I've taken enough of your time. Do you have any other things?
Yeah, and the board, this will be for anybody else that's
I'm
here
sorry
too.
for you had to wait.
Yeah, no, they're fine. It's obviously you got some choices. You can deliberate this right now amongst yourselves and make a decision and make a vote. You can say we want to take it under advisement, and it will still be a public hearing in the future where you guys need to discuss and make a decision. But I mean, if you want to dig through this, or if you want to consult the county attorney or another attorney, you have some options. You don't have to make a decision today. I would recommend not dragging this thing out for too long, right? And we can set up a meeting for you guys that we give notice to the public and all that kind of stuff at any time in the future. We will have at least one PTABOA coming up because we had one taxpayer that had a conflict. So we have one hanging out there that's not today. But we don't have a date set for that. It could be in January, it could be next June. You know what I mean? Like, there's no when it's just one, we're not going to rush to get all of you guys together. But if you end up making, we call it like tabling it so they can discuss it and make a decision. You also have just decisions there. Do you want any additional evidence from myself or from the taxpayer? That would be the end of, we don't come back and discuss it when they do that kind of second hearing, right? So I wouldn't testify, you wouldn't testify, but they can request, by January 15th, Tom, please provide us with X, Y, or Z. Or they could be like, Josh, can you please provide us with X, Y, or Z by the same date? So that's not so much in this case. It might be more in the next case when we're dealing with an apartment complex and stuff like that. Maybe they'll want some more details. But I'm just kind of letting the board know they've got options. They might decide to just make a decision right now, and you'll know. It might be a month from now before they get together, and then so you know what your options are. If you get denied, or if you're unhappy with any part of the decision, the next step is to the IBTR. You have 45 days from when Kim will send you a form of their decision. So it's not even when they make the decision. If she takes a month to send that form, it's from that date. You have 45 days when the form is sent to you, okay? So I don't want you to miss that window.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't think we have
No,
to worry
you've
about
been very kind throughout this whole thing. It was, I was expecting much more confrontation, so I appreciate that. I appreciate that we can try to be civil, and then they'll make a decision. Either, I don't know I'll let you guys talk now and decide what you want to do.
I'm torn as probably most decisions. There's the rules and what should be, So I guess that's kind of where I'm at. We have to follow what the rules are, even if sadly sometimes they're not as they should be. So that's kind of where I'm at, and you are out.
Yeah,
He's
I need to go on
recusing
record
himself.
that I need to abstain from this vote because I've had some interaction with Tom on this
Okay.
property
Okay.
a couple of years ago, so I'm sorry about that.
Nope, that's all right.
Everybody's looking at me.
I didn't know.
Well, she's kind of already said her
I
piece,
guess I'm
right?
not sure where you're coming
Now,
from.
Tom, I appreciate all the information that you've shared with us this morning. Likewise, I can see your point of view. From my perspective, I have to look at the timely filing for the homestead. And if I'm to represent any potential Whitley County taxpayer that wants to appeal, if I as a part of the group, let them do a late filing and accept it, it's going to be utter chaos. It will be. So my feeling is that because it wasn't filed timely, and I'll make it into a motion, but that we deny the appeal, knowing that you have that opportunity and ability to kick it up to the state level. I don't necessarily like the idea that you have to go the extra mile, but from my standpoint, I see no other way other than to deny it because of that.
And if you do that, I hope at the same time, and I don't know how many denials they process up there. At that point, they have to tell the people, you can appeal this. That's when that information has, because otherwise, they don't know about it. How would they know about it? How do they know that they could, they always think these assessors or, or this board has all power of it,
And
So
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let me just share, just as a side note, that I spent 27 years in municipal government. Spent a lot of time with the municipal attorney. And there are so many forms, so many regulations that need to be looked at and potentially updated, to your point, that we can always improve upon things. That's not necessarily the work of this board, but I saw it for 27 years. I would hope that there's some mechanism that lets the applicant know that they can appeal it. I don't know that that's the case. Doesn't sound like maybe that it's clear if there is, but as a taxpayer, maybe that's where you step in on behalf of the residents and say, okay, you know,
And then, so the only way I can do that really is by pushing it forward.
Right.
And that's what I'll do.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's kind of a shame that on a technicality, right?
Right.
And
So-
a technicality where I didn't even have the information, you know, I mean, so, but anyway, Jenny did ask me, she said, do you have your paperwork? I said, "Well, as long as I got my paperwork, I should be fine." And so,
Yeah.
because then sooner or later, law's supposed to be about they used to call it the reasonable man, right? But now reasonable person. There's nothing reasonable about that. There's nothing reasonable about that. So, yes, when you said that, of course I want to get mad and shout.
Right.
What are you talking about? You know, what kind of attorney told you that's what you're gonna hang your head on? But, you know, my Chad, thank God for his advice to me. I'm gonna follow it, I'm gonna keep going.
So that's my motion.
And
to
and I
deny
will
it.
second Jeff's.
And-
Well, can you just give me the form then that I need, so I can just push this forward and the next, what do I need to?
Yeah, can we, she'll technically have to send you the actual decision form, but you can get the form right away that you'll have to file off of when you get that form. It's actually a 131 instead of a 130. Do you think Carrie can maybe print that off if he heads upstairs since we're all here?
Yeah.
Okay. If you head up to our office, in the assessor's office, just upstairs in the hall, one of the gals will have that printed off for you so that you can just have that form. And like I said, Kim, when we're all done here today, she'll have to process those decisions through another forms. Right.
Who do I fill out on the $70? Who do I fill, or how do I get paid?
So is that with the, like,
That's a
that's
solid-
something that's attached to your tax bill,
Yeah,
right?
That's a
And so
solid
it's-
waste fee that goes on, that gets put on in the auditor's office, and that gets put on your tax bill, and we're not affiliated with that at all. That comes to your tax bill.
It's the same point though, it's the same, it's about Whitley County, if you're in public government for 27 years, public government needs to do better. It's the same point. You can't charge for something and not provide
Yeah,
the
so
service. That's
my only
ridiculous.
question is, who do you start with on that one? And trust me, not to take up anyone else's time, I just did a case the other day where they owned a 10-foot easement strip of land. The family farm was both sides, the lakeside and the countryside of the road. And it's since been parceled out over the years, and these have houses, but Grandpa kept a 10-foot strip in case anybody ever wanted to go to the lake. What has happened since then is the neighbors put a driveway near it and pushed all the dirt into their easement. The regional sewer district, I don't know if it's the contractor or the sewer district who did this on this lake, put the riser in the middle of their 10-foot. And then when you go to the road, NIPSCO put their telephone pole at the road in their 10-foot, and Ligtel put their box in their 10-foot. Everybody who could take a piece of them took a piece of them, and they're going to have to, it's going to be a lawsuit to get rid of it, right? No one's going to move their stuff without legal action. And that like she just kept saying, this is here, and I'm like, how does this happen? How does all of this stuff? So my same question was for her at that point, that taxpayer. I'm like, I don't even know where you start, but I know you probably start with the entity that has caused the problem. So if it was me, if I was in your shoes, I would first call the solid waste and be like, I'm getting charged on my tax bill. I realize everyone is, but I don't have use of it because no one has ever provided me a method to use it. So you're technically charging me for a service that you're not allowing me to use. You know what I mean?
And I did, and she said, well, you needed to fill out a form. It's the same thing.
That's our form.
Yeah, you needed to fill out a form.
Yeah.
To
So
get the-
again, I will tell you the same thing I told that lady. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but it's unfortunately it's definitely not the assessor's office, and to an extent because those are their own entities. I would say it's probably not even Whitley County. Like this was in LaGrange County, and she's like, "Well, do I talk to commissioners?" I said, "You can, but it's not going to go anywhere with the commissioners. You're going to have to go to NIPSCO and say move your pole, and you're probably going to have to go get an attorney to write that letter, because without having someone with Esquire after their name, they're not listening to you. They'll just be like, "Yeah, she'll go away eventually." Right? But if you start to threaten legal action, maybe it will happen. You might actually have to take the legal action, and then it's like, it's just, you felt terrible for her. You're like, and we did. In that case, because her use had been extremely reduced, it was a valuation appeal, right? You're saying this thing's not worth anything because I can't use it because everyone's encroaching on my property. And so they made a change, not to nothing, but they did make a change at the board at that point. But she's like, well, what do I do about all this stuff? And we're like, we've done what we can do. I'm not sure exactly what you do about that, but you have to start with those entities. And so you're in the same boat to a degree with just at least solid waste. If you say that and they're like, well, you should have filled out a form, then I don't know what your recourse is, right? I don't know if it's, again, you get maybe Chad has an attorney friend from Harvard that'll send a little letter, right? I mean, be like, hey, help dad out here, get your buddy or your friend to send a letter that says we need this taken care of, right? But understand that you could do that for 2 or 3 years and end up just paying your $70 and never hearing back. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I think out there at the sewer district, even if you have a barrel odd, when you go to hook up, they're gonna collect from the time that was put in.
Was
Back in the day,
available.
Yeah.
they tried, see, I paid for the hookup way back.
Yeah.
The hookup was paid for.
But it-
So it
yeah,
was all more
I know
just
what
a
you're
question
talking
of
about, something
putting a
separate.
well in, and
Yeah.
that's $7,000
Yeah.
from there, and then, but then NIPSCO charged
You
I mean, the
text
whole
her.
beauty of a long lot is good until you try to.
Yeah.
Everything went from free, same thing, NIPSCO was free, until I tried to hook up.
So
Oh,
that sewer
that law
line,
changed.
sewer line didn't run along the lake at your point of,
Well, that just depends. Like, I live at a lake and they're putting sewer down my road. They keep pushing it off a little bit because of how expensive costs got a little bit with inflation, right? But
Yeah.
they let me pick where my grinder goes. And they wanted me and the neighbor to share, but we didn't like the aesthetics of, in between our properties is really nice. The other edges of our property is kind of shrubbery and stuff. And we're like, well, so I wanted mine on this side, he wanted his on this side. And they never questioned us. They were like, they walked through the yard and they're like, here, and I'm like, no, further, in the bushes over there. I know they wanted the easiest straight line, but they let me pick so I could do exactly I want gravity feed to that. I don't want to pay for my sewage to go to the grinder. I'm already paying for it to go from the grinder because there'll be a little electricity with that, right? I don't want to pump it to that and then pump it to there. I just want to flow to there and then pump it to there. So, but I'm not on your lake. It was, different situation.
Yeah, very similar though, and then once again, I shouldn't have honked off it.
Yeah, because it's like 700 feet between my grinder and the road. Like, it's not a short, I'm off the road, just maybe not quite as far as you are. I don't know how far off you are now, but I'm not on the road. And I was like, are they just going to pay for all that? And they're like, yep, it's all part of the grant because they're just coming through the first time.
And that's
right?
it. The grant, but they lost the grant was my deal. But
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm glad to be.
All
with
right,
you.
well, if you don't
Appreciate
mind,
it.
we're going to let.
Yeah, you have
Oh.
a motion and a second.
Oh, you have to do one final word
Call
on
for the
this?
vote. You're already abstaining, but you can call for the
Okay.
vote.
we've had a motion, there's a second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I'll go up and get that one. Thank you.
Tom, did you speak with Tara Myers at the Solid Waste
did.
Management?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've already spoken with her.
So I need a
Trying to get you a contact, but you already got that one. So.
Okay.
Tom, on that foundation you mentioned, will he need to get a demolition permit if he takes that out in order to get that off the?
You'll need to check with planning and building and see if you need a demo permit on that upstairs. When you go upstairs to get the 131 in our
Yeah.
office, and they'll have that, my office will have that ready for you when you go upstairs, the state appeal form. You know where planning and building is, you could check with them on a demo permit.
Okay.
That's how they know that you removed it then, Tom. Otherwise, if you take it out, it
Yeah.
still might show up.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Take care.
Okay, we're gonna jump along
That
then.
was probably fun and insightful.
Yeah.
You got
If
that.
you want to take a break, if you want to do something.
You guys good?
I'm
I'm
good.
okay.
Good.
Okay. Hi, Keith.
Good morning.
Okay, this is an administrative hearing being held on December 11th, 2024 in the Whitley County Government Center in the County Commissioner County Council Meeting Room. This hearing is being recorded. This hearing is being conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as found in IC 6-1.1-1-1. Okay, we put the following persons are representing the PTABOA: Greg Fall, Jeff Walker, Teresa Sedaris. The following persons are representing the Whitley County Assessor's Office: Josh Pettit, from Nexus on behalf of the Whitley County Assessor's Office and Kim Erdley, Whitley County Assessor. Will all persons who are or may be witnesses to this hearing please raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, so we're going to go with Columbia City RE Developers, known as Quail Ridge Apartments.
Okay.
Petition number 92-014-24-4-00001. Parcel number 92-05-06-000-302, period 900-014. Property location of North 200 East in Columbia City, Indiana. Keith, we'll let you start. Mike, please.
Great. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It looks like we've cleared the room, so we have the rest of the day for this. Just kidding. My name is Keith Wolak. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Collins Equity Group. We're the management arm for all of the Collins developments across the state. Please don't call me the CEO. I'm the COO. Okay. Just a little background before I get into my substantive arguments. I'm not sure how familiar the board is with our property at Quail Ridge. Quail Ridge is a Collins development, and it's kind of unique in the sense that it has 4 different products in that development. It has traditional 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. It has garden homes, which are connected like 8 buildings or 8 units together with just a 1-car garage. So we call those a garden patio type style home. We have single-family homes, which are independent 2-car garage homes. And then we have a senior living building, which is one big building with its own rec room, its own gym for people 55 and over in the community. So basically, that's our I don't want to say that's our standard formula. It's a common formula as to how we go into a community. We bring in a bundle of products, we build them all at once, we build them at a very low cost, and then we hold them. So the thing that the point that I'm trying to get here is that our developments are not like other developments. So we're not really comparable to your apartment complex. We're not really comparable to other senior living centers because we are a one-shop stop of everything. And I don't think that you could find a sale of a product like ours because nobody does the combination that we do. So when you get us into the community, what you're really getting is a stable owner, the Collins Group. We build it ourselves through our construction company. We manage it ourselves through our management company, and we keep it. So unlike other developers who might come to town who want to build it and then dump it and then run, we stay for the long haul. And that's part of the reason we're going to talk a little bit about cost today. Part of the reason why we focus on low costs when we build, A, because we do it efficiently. Everything I described to you, we would build out with about 18 months, which no one else is going to do that. And as we do that, what our objective is to build and hold, build and stay. So we're not looking to, we get calls every day from venture capital companies wanting to buy products, but we don't sell them because we want to be in the community, we want to be part of the community. And we're in about, I think we have properties in 6 or 7 different counties in the state of Indiana. All of our products are in Indiana. But nevertheless. So what we want to do is we want to bring a quality product that meets the needs of your community because, and this is just a little sidebar here. When I talk about the uniqueness of our product, when I talked about those senior buildings, the senior building that we have, those are our lowest rent, lowest profit buildings. But our owner insists on making them part of the mix because he sees it as part of supporting and sustaining the community with the housing that the seniors need. So we could do better if we just put more apartments in or more, actually the best thing we have is the patio homes. Everybody loves those. But we don't do it that way. We do it in a way that is intentionally not the most profitable for us, because we're trying to actually fit a need so that we fit into the community, we have a stable product. So you have stable ownership over the long haul. You have a stable product that's designed to meet your needs. And I just looked up the rent for our apartment buildings on apartments.com yesterday, and we're listed below our competitor in town on rent price. So we're trying to provide reasonable rent, good product. And the other thing I would emphasize is, if you want to take a minute, or if you haven't been there, to drive through Quail Ridge, I think you would be impressed with how we maintain it. So unlike the people who come in and they don't really put the money in to fix the siding, and they don't really keep the sidewalks nice, and they don't really do all those things, we're doing those things because we are intending to hold these properties in perpetuity. As a matter of fact, I was joking with my boss, Alan, yesterday, and he said, guess how many products I've sold in the last 30 years? 0. He doesn't sell these, he holds them, and I don't see that changing in the future. So that's the reason I'm bringing all this up, is because it relates to what we would have the debate that Josh and I are going to have about market value. And we've had some of this debate already in his office. But market value, the state statute in Indiana, and I don't know if I have to quote the statute, but it's here. It says that, when we try to find true tax value for real estate tax purposes, true tax value is not market value. The Supreme Court will tell you that it can, excuse me, I'm getting too excited. It can be market value, but it's not by default market value. And the Supreme Court has also said, when does market value really become the key factor in determining the valuation of a property? And that's when there are readily identifiable transactions that can help price the product. And we don't have that. I mean, even if you were to look at an apartment complex sale, or a house complex sale, or a duplex complex sale, none of that can add up to the combination of what we have, the way we have it. And there just isn't going to be a market, a traceable market of transactions in this area. Because of that, all the discussion of market value and market value approaches, which and Josh and I have exchanged some information already, and I saw some of the stuff he's going to present, is going to include, market cap rates and market this and market that. But that is not, the Supreme Court's already told us that's not our test. So what is our test for our property? And the legislature has delegated to the Department of Local Government Finance the responsibility to determine what the values are. And what they say is that true value means the utility received by the owner or similar user for the property. So, what does that mean? It means that you should look at this based on how we're operating our specific unit, and that basically means the income approach. And the income approach basically says, what money do we make from it? How do we extrapolate that to a value? And then that's the basis upon which we should pay tax. And I've already told you, our income is going to be lower than the guy from out of town who's not doing the maintenance work because he's not putting the maintenance money back in, right? Our income is going to be lower because we're not charging the highest possible rent we can charge. As a matter of fact, we have a policy and that when people are renewing, we generally don't up them to the current market rate. We kind of stair step them, with a smaller increase because, we've got people who have been with us a long time, or we have elderly people. So we're not here to just say, okay, housing shortage, everyone goes up, at maximum percentage, because that's the idea of how we're going to make money. We're going to make money over the long run, over the long cycle of this investment. And we do that for our investors as well. We don't own everything. We have investors for these projects, and we are investors ourselves. Okay, so circling back to how do we calculate the income approach? And this is the crux of where Josh and I are going to have our biggest disagreement. So again, the Indiana legislature has designated that the DGLF can designate how to do these valuations, and they have a assessment manual, they have a real property assessment manual, they've given seminars on how to do it, and those are the things that we have followed. Now, Josh is going to tell you, Well, you still have to compare everything to fair market value. What the DGLF assessment manual says is actually that you should develop a cap, well, this is the statute. You should, this is statute 6-1.1-4-39, says that when you're trying to figure out the value on the income basis for apartment project like ours, or multifamily project, that you develop the cap rate to be used that leads to a value where the, that is commensurate with the risk for the subject property use, okay? So two points there. The statute says we develop the rate, we don't just take a rate from the page, and we make it specific to the subject matter at use. And that's exactly what we do when we do our valuations. The real estate property assessment manual acknowledges all this, and at the end they say, you can also use any other kind of, appraisal techniques to fill in the blanks. Okay, that's fair enough. But the appraisal techniques to fill in the blanks aren't superseding the statute that says, A, give the lowest of the income method, the cost method, and the market method, and B, the income method should be based on a developed capped rate for the specific property. So that's the thing. So where does that all lead us? And I'll save the rest of that kind of discussion for when Josh responds, because I'm sure we'll have some back and forth, because it's kind of informal. But where does all that lead us? The rate that I think has been used by the county against our property is what we would call an 8% cap rate. Now, I will tell you a couple things as background. I have the blessing or the curse of being able to handle the property taxes on all the counties I just talked to you about. This project is taxed, or I should say, the assessment on this project is the highest of all the assessments that we get. The rate that Josh is using to calculate our value on the income method, which wasn't even the lowest across all spectrum of the state, our lowest method is always the income method, because you're taking into account what we actually are deriving from the property, and that's always going to be less than what market speculation is and other things. So everywhere else we go, we're always at the lowest on the income method. But in this case, the income method cap rate is so low that it actually is the highest, or one of the higher values. So we're not using the income method here, we're using the cost method, okay? So I guess I'm trying to just throw out a few distinctions for you to understand. One is, this is the most expensive. Two is, this is the only place where we're using the cost method. Three is, when you look at the income method at 8% for cap rates, this is the only county that's asserting anything less than 10% to us on a cap rate. Now, every percent of the cap rate is about $1.2 million in value. So you can pretty much understand that when St. Joe County says 10% and you say 8%, you're looking at $2.5 million higher assessment than we would have in St. Joe. So that's the issue that we have with the cap rate. I'll kind of leave it there because I'm sure that Josh wants to say a few things. The other point I would make, because the cost method is actually the method that's used, okay, for our calculation, we have some issues with that as well, okay? Now, you probably are aware that you basically, I think, have two big apartment complexes in the county that actually pay real estate tax. Us and another one called Columbia City Place Apartments. We are not taxed the same on a cost basis with them, okay? They are taxed as general construction residential. We are taxed at the higher general construction mercantile. We are currently taxed at D+2 grade. They are taxed at D+2 grade as residential. We talked to Josh about this. He said, yeah, that should probably be changed to residential, but I'm going to change it to a C instead of a D2 because it's a wooden structure, and so it should be C, not D2. But our competitor is a wooden structure, 3 levels just like us, and they're taxed at D2 as residential. So they're getting a lower rent. So when I take away, I told you we're a blended product. When I take away and I just look at the apartment product we have and I compare it to that apartment product we have and I figure out 36 units versus 12 units and blah, 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 Their average cost, you're assessing them $30,000 per apartment, you're assessing us $50,000 per apartment. And that's just the apartments, that's not the garden, that's not the other stuff. So something's not right there. Something is not right there. And that's just cost, that's on the cost bracket. Now, I understand there's gonna be a little depreciation difference in there, the ages are a little different. But I think there's some factors that really need to be fleshed out. And we had a similar problem, and I provided these things to Josh, and he can circulate them to you, I could circulate them to you, but I don't know that you really want to get into the weeds of it. I guess it's probably going to be in the record because I gave it to Josh. There's another competitor called TLK Holdings, which is a garden home unit. So the garden homes is the one level, 8 buildings, 8 units together, 1-car garage for each unit. I'd have to look back at my notes. I think the discrepancy there was even larger, but it wasn't on the actual cost structure. It's that they're getting an 83% obsolescence rating on their building. And I have no idea why that would be. No one's getting obsolescence on anything anymore. Ever since the law changed where the cost structure was adjusted by the state, everybody's obsolescence went by. So I don't know, maybe there's a reason. I don't know what that reason would be. I'm not really gonna get about it. I think the average cost of those units per unit was $11,000. Our average cost on our assessment was $73,000. So I don't want to put too fine of a point on this, but it's important that I bring it to your attention. So we are actively looking for new places to go. We are in negotiation with, I think, 3 different counties on places we could do another development, similar to what we've done. And I would be not being fully disclosing to you all the facts if I told you that this is not helping the cause of us bringing another project to Whitley County. The 2 things I talked about on the cost structure are really kind of hurtful in a sense, is that, we're not, you always want to be treated like everybody else or on par, right? So that's upsetting. And then, of course, we'll debate the cap rates. I don't know what else to say about the cap rates other than to say no one is taking the position you're taking that we can't build a cap rate based on our investment costs, our recapture costs, and our tax costs. That methodology is approved by the Department of Local Government Finance. They taught that method in their income approach to value level 2 tutorial. Okay, we're following that. I don't know why it's being disregarded for a strictly market-based analysis. And again, just to recap, every time you hear something that says market, a red flag should go off in your head and say, market doesn't apply to this property because this property is not readily comparable to other properties like it that are regularly transferred. And therefore, we're out of the market zone, and now we're into the figure it out the best we can zone. And that's really where we are in all of our projects. We're always trying to work with the assessor's office to find something that's reasonable and fair and in line with what we're facing across the state. So let me just see if I have any other final comments, and I'll of course supplement as required. I do hope if you haven't had a chance to go by Quail Ridge that you will, because I think it's a great project and it's something that we're real proud of and we're really excited to keep doing across the state. 2 final points that are ringing in my head from my discussions with my boss before I came over here. If we had to pay the cost that we're being assessed on the cost method, we wouldn't do the project. I don't mean that from a tax standpoint. I mean from a feasibility standpoint. We have to build it for less than it would otherwise cost. And I probably shouldn't talk out of school, but I'll give you a quick example. We're building in another community, which I won't name the name, and the sewer work had to be done. They got 2 bids, one from Reith Riley, one from us. Theirs was $3 million, ours was $1 million. That's the difference between what we do and what you would do at retail. You can't really count us at retail because we're building it ourselves. And so that's the other criticism of the cost approach. So trying to put the best spin on it as possible, we want a good relationship with Whitley County and the assessor's office. We want a good relationship with all of the departments by having a great product that everyone's happy with. And we want to be able to keep providing the housing that people need. We're in a real tight housing market. We have a real need. There's a change in demographics and how people are living their lives and what kind of housing they need. And it's really kind of our mission to fill that and to be stable and to not just build things and dump them and let them go to disrepair and let them become the problem of the enforcement division rather than of us. So with that, I would release the floor to Josh to rebut my comments, and then we can maybe have further discussion.
Well, first of all, do you guys have questions, or maybe just, if you heard some points he made, want to make sure you have clarification? I want to make sure, while his is fresh in your minds, he can answer those before I go into.
Yeah, he'd mentioned Columbia City Place apartments. I can't think of any, because of the variety of housing that is offered in Allen's development, I can't think of another development in Columbia City that is directly comparable. So and the other thing is that I live at Eagle Glen, so I walk through Quail Ridge on the regular, not to mention that I worked very, very closely with Allen during the development. He's a man of vision. He's
Oh, Alan's great. I've known Alan for maybe 20 years. I was telling Keith this. That goes all the way back to the beginning of my career, and Alan was building these
Alan
things,
knows
so.
what he wants. He's a tough negotiator, but I think fair. And in my role with the city, when I was still working before retirement, I would welcome every day of the week having a development like that and come to Columbia City. I wish they would all be like that.
Yeah, he takes a lot of pride in it. He really does. And he's obsessive about making things right. I mean, if I drive through with him, he's pointing at things, complaining, and I'm like, it looks fine to me. I just keep my mouth shut and take my notes and go on. But anyway, any other questions or concerns?
It is very well maintained, Keith, so I wanted to
Oh,
mention
good.
that
Thank you.
too. You know, you drive by there and to your point, fixing things and watching over that is great. What's your vacancy rate on there? You probably about 100% full, I guess. But
No, it's not as high. It's not that high.
Yeah.
There is.
Oh,
which
really?
units have a higher?
So the
One of
issue-
your property types has
Yeah.
a higher vacancy.
The issue we're having well, I won't get issue, but the biggest vacancy is in the one bedroom. So we're actually changing our formula away from one bedrooms to two bedrooms. And I think what it is because there's more people working from home. They need that extra room
Yeah.
for an office.
probably so.
Yeah, things
And-
have changed a lot. in the
Yeah,
last
so
4
just some
years.
demographic changes.
Yeah.
So, we're kind of pairing that for the future as we think, that you gotta have a little bit of it, but not as much of it. But that's really where our weak spot is. I think everything else is doing pretty good.
And he did provide you guys rent rolls, and you'll see
I
that.
did
The
see
one
that.
bedroom
I
is
drew it all.
first, and it's at 77.8%
Okay.
as of 1/1/24. So things may have changed in the last, but that's not.
Well, that
important.
is surprising.
But you do get some of these, they are 100, right? And that's what I was
Well, I
surprised, because when
figured
we
it.
did the model for income,
Yeah.
we assumed, 5%, you know what I mean? And then
Did ya?
some of these changed that.
On your
right?
vacancy
So-
rate, 7-8%, yeah. I figured they were pretty full, just the way the rental market is. So I'm surprised your vacancy rate's that high on your one bedrooms.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that I think you might see where people are having trouble affording housing. They might have a roommate where they need the
Yeah,
extra
well,
bedroom
that's true,
for that.
yeah.
And so it's just, the
Yeah,
one
that's true.
bedroom,
Yeah.
you think of it as being like the lowest cost, but it's not when you have an alternative as to another family member
Yeah.
or you need that office, or you need more, or maybe we're all just getting used to more space. I don't know.
Yeah.
We all tend to take up more space as time goes on. But, but that is something that we.
And that's everywhere. My niece and
Is
her
it?
husband live in downtown Chicago, Wrigleyville side, and they have never gone back to work after COVID. They both work from home now, and they were in a one-bedroom with, Chicago, right? So it was, the size of what Kim and I are sitting in, right? It was super small, and they finally had to move.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't have enough space,
Huh.
and it's because they're just home all the time.
Yeah.
They're working from
Makes
home and
sense.
living there, and, so I think that, we think about that sometimes in the little apartments, and the city, but it's also people that are living in a 1,000 square foot
Yeah.
house. It's not big
Yeah.
enough anymore to have a 2-bedroom if you've got, a kid or two if you're at home a lot. So I will agree with that. But no, go ahead, continue before I
had one maybe for you, Josh, on your calculations. Does the building cost affect what you assess it at? I mean, Keith mentioned they build them cheaper because they do it themselves.
And I made some notes about that,
Did
so
you?
I will
Okay.
address that in a
Okay.
second.
Okay,
So, I guess without interrupt me at any time if something pops in your head that you did want to ask Keith about. And Keith, you can ask for clarification. We've talked for a while in the office, so you kind of know where I'm going to head. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background just for them. You're familiar with it. Apartments got completely reviewed because they passed a new law, of course. So, everybody's getting their own law now, and apartments are the latest. And we were required to do all 3 approaches to value on every single apartment of more than 4 units. There's probably some that were missed. If you have 5 units above a downtown building, I probably missed that one, right? Or if you have 8 duplexes for 16 units, but every single one of them on a separate parcel, I might have missed those. And if those people came in appeal, we would then look at them as a whole, right? But in general, we had to do a sales comparison approach, we had to do an income approach, and we had to do the cost, right? And they are very specific that the cost is also without modifiers, so you can't have market adjustments or neighborhood factors on those costs, okay? So what we did as a company, what I did here in the county, was tried to gather all of those apartments, tried to make sure the cost was just straight cost, took off market factors that were taking them to last year's market value, right, whatever that was. And then we really just developed models for income and for sales comparison. So we tried to just go through and say, okay, we can't have a model for every single apartment complex. So we had one for your Section 515, which is your really low-end government subsidized housing in rural development, right? So there's enough of those throughout the communities in this county and other counties that we could develop a model for Section 515. And then we had conventional type apartments that we tried to, in the end, break into 3 categories: a higher end, a mid-range, and a low end. And the thing that would change is the comps on the sales would change, right? These might be worth 40, these might be worth 90, whatever the case is, right? So per unit. And then we just kind of apply the right number of units, which sometimes got changed through appeal when we found out that our unit mix was wrong, our unit number was wrong. And Keith will agree. This sales comparison approach we'll never talk about again after I get down here in a second, because it is the highest approach you can possibly do. What somebody will pay you for your unit is the highest currently. Starting to see those things creep down a little bit in the market, but going into 2024, where we're really assessing, apartments were still, people were stashing cash in apartments. They were just like, these REITs were buying them, venture capitalists, like he said, have called him. All kinds of people were parking money in apartments and pushing those prices up. And it's not really part of my evidence, but there is a line on here that says in the Whitley County submarket from CoStar in the last 4 or 5 years, the average sale price per unit is like 121. So that's going to include, every apartment, including maybe some smaller apartments that are really well maintained, duplexes, stuff like that. But yeah, so that's really high, right? We weren't even trying to get there. I think our market model came out at 89 or 90 per unit for the model we put Allen's complex into. So Quail Ridge is in one that's the conventional plus. It's the higher end, we think. Then we also tried to estimate rents. We had a little bit of rent information from them from previous appeals, and estimate rents and expenses for the model. And then we had a cap rate for the model, right? So in the end, our income approaches, unless we had very specific information or they had already appealed after the fact, our income would come out almost the exact same per unit. Right, so because it's a model, it's mass appraising, right? So if it came out to 60,000 per unit, it came out to 60,000 per unit for everybody in that model. And then the last one would be cost approach. So for the most part, I tried to go through and make sure that grades were correct, and grade will be an issue as we talk. Obviously, I didn't get deep enough in, because if I would have caught that it was GCM, I would have said it should be GCR. So that's It's a slight difference in the pricing model. It's more of a residential in nature. You get this in all commercial property for the most part. The best example is when you see banks. So if banks look like they're a house, you know, they got like a gable roof and it's shingled, or maybe now it's metal, right? Because everyone's doing that. And it's, you know, it's a brick structure, but it's wood behind that. If it's concrete block, it changes the model. But if it's, you know, and if it's flat roof and modern design and all that, it's GCM. Over here it's GCR because it looks like it would fit in a residential neighborhood, and it's built with basically residential materials, right? We don't see too many people in Indiana building their residence out of concrete block or tip-up concrete forms or something weird like that, right? So the first thing he did was he brought that up, and we agreed. We 100% agreed. There's also some enclosed frame porches on the front of the apartment buildings where the staircases are, and I immediately said, I think that's just part of the space, right? It's heated. I think we wanted to make that change because it would also benefit the taxpayer in that case. If I find cost changes that will benefit the taxpayer, and I did right away, without looking at any other apartments, I said, well, when I assess, if I'm going GCR and it's typical construction, I'm going to say C grade. We will get a little bit into this with them building their own, and I guess let's just get into that right now. So he did make a conversation about this one project they have with the sewer that Reith Riley was 3 times as expensive. I don't know if the market is Reith Riley, because that's only one data point that he gave us, but we will tell you that if you built your garage, we're not going to price it for your cost to build the garage because you did it yourself. We would price it at what it would cost the typical person to build a garage. I don't know how to build a garage. You might know how to build a garage. I don't, but I have to price in the cost of labor and, you know, the construction crew's overhead and all that. That's in the model for the cost approach. Now, I will also tell you, the cost approach is terrible because the DLGF, I hope everyone hears me on record, has very low cost tables. They use a system that is, if you look at actual cost versus what goes in the system, they are almost always, I don't know for an apartment complex, but I can tell you for the average C-grade home, if Granite Ridge came in and built a home today, it's 40% under assessed the first day. Because that's how far behind our costs are. Okay, so the cost tables are like that across the board. It's expensive to use Marshall and Swift. That's what we're asking, like our company is asking them to just invest, the state should invest in Marshall and Swift and get it right. That's what our appraisers use when they go out. But they're using something else, and the solution is to factor all of that up. So the neighborhood factors you see on homes, the neighborhood factors you used to see on apartments or things like that, or market factors, we're trying to adjust that to market because the costs aren't right. They're not even close, right? So they're being adjusted accordingly. The new law says we can't adjust those. Okay, so the real way to figure this out, which I don't even think is possible at this point, would be go back and say, what would it cost to build this complex, and then allow it to depreciate. So this is a issue that goes back at least a decade, if not more, with the concept of what is the right cost. And I don't want to get too much on cost because I want to eventually get to the income side, and that's where Keith and I have disagreed, but I do want to explain our position and let you guys decide what the right way to go is. There was a big box, who I won't mention, but a big box, you know what those are, big box retailer who appealed for years, and they said, all we want you to do is put it on the cost approach. And we're like, the counties, we were representing some of them, some were represented by other attorneys and themselves or whatever the case is. And everyone agreed, we're fine using the cost. The question is, what's the cost? And they're like, well, we think we have a C-grade building. Okay, show us your cost, and if C-grade buildings come out to that cost, we'll call it a C-grade discount retail. They wouldn't give us their cost. The problem is their costs weren't C-grade. Now in this case, we're talking about a D+2 or a C. The real issue we come down to is what is the actual cost? And it's a little muddy because the state's not telling us to use the actual cost. The state's telling us to use their cost tables without modifiers. But where Keith and I will disagree is, and he's not the only one, I have lots of tax reps and taxpayers that don't like this next comment. All three approaches are the same. in the market, all three approaches are the same. They can pass laws, they can do all kinds of things, but the law doesn't say that we are supposed to knowingly undervalue property. It says use the lowest of the three because they just don't work out the same all the time. But in a vacuum, every piece, all three approaches derive some piece of their value from each other or the market. So in the case of cost, the part of cost that is taken from the market does take into consideration the additional increase in inflation and cost, right? The actual costs go up over time, but then they also take in depreciation. So how do you know what depreciation really is? Depreciation is based on the value that somebody will pay you for it after you take those costs plus the cost of land plus development, and then you back into depreciation. So depreciation is derived from the market. In the income side, and we'll talk about this to a greater extent, the cap rate is derived from the market. The rents are technically on market value. The rents are also derived from the market. So if you had a house that you were renting and you were renting it for $500 to your sister-in-law, that's not the market value of that particular house. Now, I don't think we're going to argue rents. I think their rents are reasonable. Even if they're a little lower than the competition, that doesn't bother us, right? Unless they were significantly lower. You know, if the market said they should rent something for $1,200 and they're $800, we might have a problem. But I think they're just a little lower. Keith, agree? You're not really low, right? You guys aren't really dumping these values, right? I mean, you're trying to be reasonable to keep your vacancy good and keep it affordable for the community, right? I mean, we can respect that. So
They are not below market as in that arm's length, like a related party would be. I mean, I don't know, I mean, $50 or $100 is a big deal to the tenants, so I mean, I
Right.
think that's a lot of money. It could be a big deal to us too, I suppose, because it changed the bottom line. But I think from the income approach, I think if you're not having a related party transaction, it's an arm's length transaction, which is what we are, then use that information to derive your value because that's what the value is.
And the good news is I guess I've exhausted the cost side. That we are currently at the cost. If we make the changes, the one thing we will disagree on is I think it's C-grade quality. I'm not going to go into all this. I'm sure you guys are going to want to look at all of this at some point. I did give you this is from the guideline, the DLGF. You can see there's very little difference actually between C-grade and B-grade costs. There's actually not much difference between B-grade and C-grade cost. You know what I mean? When it just description, right? So those values come out different. So we are making a subjective decision out there. And I will speak real quickly, and then I'm not going to talk about the competitors at all. TLK is Section 42. That's why they've got that on there, because they have their own law. They have a very specific law on how to do Section 42. They are 100%, you might as well not even call them apartments compared to them. Okay, so they're not even the same. And I did get a note from, is Columbia City Place also Section 42?
I just had Carrie pull it up. There's no alert note on it.
I don't think they're Section 42. Okay, I think Kim was maybe just asking me that. I don't think they're Section 42. I will agree that they are on as D+2. I think they also appealed this year, and they withdrew their appeal ultimately because they were on at cost, and maybe they're okay with cost because they're D+2 and they should be C also. I don't know, but their income, no matter how you sliced it, didn't help them. So they did turn in income. There was also a cap rate argument with that tax rep on that one. He ultimately withdrew. That has no bearing on Keith's. He does not have to withdraw because he doesn't like my cap rate, right? Or because he, agrees with me. So that brings us down to, I think the biggest issue is one, on the cost, if we're going to change to GCR, is it proper and correct to change it to a C grade? I'll let you guys decide that, or ask qualifying questions in the future, or ask for more research, or whatever the case is. Income-wise, we're really down to this cap rate because we are just taking any apartment that appeals or turns in income. We are not really questioning it unless it does something really wild. Like I said, if it's really low rent, we might ask why. And then we might have to say, well, we're going to have to use a market rent, but his expenses are a little higher. He spoke about how they maintain their places. A lot of my apartments that are in this age range might see more of a low, like high 30, 42, 45% expense ratio. They're running about 51%. That maybe it's just because they do spend a little bit more on maintaining. Maybe they just pay their people better too to maintain those things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we're not even questioning whether that should be, we put in 51%. Like in the model, we just inputted their exact, and then we changed that. Remember I told you I was surprised to see some of these vacancies. We also made inside the model, and this is really into the minutia that you guys can request, every single one of these different types, we made its own line item. So when you look at the income, it's actually producing an income value for the one bedrooms, an income value for the garden homes, an income value for the senior side. It's produced, and then it's adding all those up to get the income. The biggest discrepancy is going to be our cap rate. Okay, so I'm going to start with, it's kind of hard to read on the copy, so I did send this to Keith, and you guys have a copy. When it comes to cap rates, this is directly from the IAAO, which the state follows in almost every aspect. 5 methods of developing an overall capitalization rate. It reads, this is the copy you guys can't see very well on the last page of my supplementary stuff that I sent to Keith. I tried to highlight it, that might have made it worse. But it says, there are 5 methods to which can be used to derive an overall capitalization rate. All 5 methods should yield exactly the same, correct, or very similar overall capitalization rate, provided valid market information is derived and applied correctly and consistently. So that's going to be part 1 of the crux of our disagreement. When you look at sales of apartment complexes in the Whitley County area, and I can give you the state of Indiana. I can give you anything you want when it comes to CoStar data on what cap rates are. I also work in Grant County. Marion County is an 8.4. Here we're a 7.8. So it's a little nicer here than it is in Marion when it comes to cap rates. It's a little higher value. The difference is the calculated developed cap rate that he's using is a 12 point, my eyes are bad, 9? Yeah. And so we don't disagree that the band of investment, this is called the band of investments methodology to develop a cap rate. We don't disagree that that is not a valid method. The problem is every single one of those numbers that spits out part of that rate has to eventually bear itself out in the market value. Because the income is still the market value, right? We're still trying to derive, and if it's not the lowest, it's not the lowest. All right, so we don't really have any skin in the game when it comes to the sales approach or the income approach or the cost approach. Whatever's the lowest, we're going to go with. And if income would have been so low that it produced a lower value, we'd have changed the value to that method, and the appeal probably would have been done, right? So the problem we run into is it has to have some sort of semblance in reality. And so whatever's happened since they built it, whether it's because they have a different expected return on the property compared to what the market has now changed to, and I think that's a lot of it. The rates have gone up recently, but people were buying these complexes at such a low cap rate because they're buy and hold. They're parking money in hundreds of thousands or multi-million-dollar complexes with the idea that long-term they will raise rates, not something they want to do. They will produce a higher income long-term, and they will get all of that terrible upfront investment back in spades, right? They will increase their profitability, and they'll also increase their real estate value long-term. And that is something that's difficult when you have someone like Alan, who I think everyone in the room can appreciate. I mean, I probably know him better than Kim does, and maybe not better than you since you've dealt with him on the project. But you have to appreciate someone who's not for sale, right? They move into town. They're staying here for the long haul. They're going to do it right. They're kind of, even a little picky and finicky about things being done a certain way and right. And I think we can appreciate that. But when it comes to an income approach, the market value by the income is not a set of numbers that the taxpayer desires, wants, or even has. It's what would the market bear? What rate would the market pay for this income stream? And so the income stream is exact and right. We all are using the same numbers on the income side to get to the NOI. The difference is, what am I capitalizing that NOI at to get to its market value, which is what my job is. My job is to get to its market value. And I know there was a little discussion, and I always drop off the in use, but in this case, in use is we can't value this as a factory. It's an apartment complex. Does it have a mixed use of types? And even you said that it's very unique compared to any other type of apartment complex. Yes, from an income side, it's an income stream, and it's not unique at all. If I were to come in and the person that offered to buy Allen's did not say, well, it's got this type of unit, so I don't know. What he's going to say is that unit profitable? And some are less profitable than others. He was already said that, and we can agree. Some of the units don't make as much money as other units. They could have made more money just putting in a certain type of unit. But that's built into the income. The NOI is reflecting that. And investors and buyers, and if Allen were to sell, which he's not for sale, but if he were to sell, he wouldn't come through and be like, well, let's capitalize it at 12% even though I lose $4 million, right? I guess I can't speak for Allen. He's not here. Maybe he'd be okay with that because he loves the person going to buy it and they're going to do the same thing he did, right? But that would then not be a willing buyer and a willing seller. That wouldn't be market value because one person is being influenced by something other than market forces. Whether it's, this is the same thing. It's like, would you sell me your home today for $1 million? No, I wouldn't. This is grandma's home. We're going to stay here forever, right? Well, you're not a willing seller at that point. So this information that I've provided for you is the market information. This is individual to the property. We do not disagree with that. But the problem is this property, since they bought it and developed it, has a different set of market circumstances to get to the market value. And we're only talking about one approach. So we don't want to use the income approach. We just want to say the income approach is higher than the cost approach. And so the county is going to ask you to stick with the cost approach and then make any changes that you feel are necessary. We feel we should change nothing this year because it hurts the taxpayer. If we change it to GCR, the county believes it should also be changed to a C grade, and we should change those porches to just part of the living space because it's all heated, it's the stairway. And we think that produces a slightly less value before the grade change. So on a cost approach, the grade is the issue. If you say D+2, you'll end up lowering the cost approach, and we're not going to tell you not to do that. We don't think it's the right thing to do. We think if you're going to change the construction model, you have to look at everything. You have to look at, is the grade correct or not? This would be similar if an industrial brought to you and said, we're a type 3 wall type. We feel for pricing, those type 3 wall types should be D+2. If it was a C, I would tell you to go lower. If you're going to change it to a type 3, you have to change it to a D+2 because that works out pricing wise from 20 years of experience doing this. All my type 3s have to be D+2 or they do something bad price wise. So it would be the same thing here, right? If we're going to change some aspect of the cost approach, we have to be holistic and make sure we change every aspect of the cost approach to be correct. The problem you run into is there's no way to actually prove what the correct cost is because the cost tables are terrible, and I'm not even asking the taxpayer to tell me how much it would cost them to build. Because I know they said if we had to build it at the cost, we wouldn't do it. And that's a luxury they have by keeping it all in-house. If you and I, were investors in a facility and wanted to build a new place, and we didn't have our own construction crew, we would have to build it at the cost. And that might make it the feasibility end at that point. It might be like construct, and people are doing that with houses, right? We can't build a house because it's too expensive, right? So luckily they have a nice place to go out to Quail Ridge and stay until they can figure it out, right? Or maybe they can't even afford that and they have to go somewhere else, right? But at the same time, the county's position is that it's not really our job. As much as we want Allen to build another one here, It's not our job to say, well, if you guys can build it for so cheap, we should do it at your costs. And that's almost the same argument we have with the income approach. If Alan can build this complex for 10% cheaper, it doesn't mean it's worth 10% less from a cost approach. If he has a cap rate that equals a 20% lower value because of a higher cap rate, that doesn't mean it's the market value. It means it's Alan's value, right? And even though we say the value is not market, we do feel that there's enough information on what apartments sell for and what their cap rates would be, that there is a market for it. This is not, we don't think it's that unique. It's beautiful, it's great, it does have features that other ones don't have, but it's still an apartment that is generating an income stream, and that is marketable. We can find a ton of market information on that apartment concept. So maybe they have different features. But that'd be like saying this one has a pool and nobody else in the county has a pool, so it's not similar. Well, we can figure that out, right? So
It does have a pool.
this one does have a pool, right? But if they were the only ones with a pool and everything else was exactly, let's say they built Columbia Place apartments, the exact same thing, only it was newer, so depreciation would be different, and they put a pool in, well, they say, well, nobody else offers these features. How can we're not comparable to anybody because we have a pool, right? And it's just not the case. I think when you break this down, it's the same thing with many warehouses have their own law too. And a lot of many warehouse owners will try to tell you, well, my client list is important. It's business value. It's intangible. And I'll be like, the fact is if you close tomorrow and I buy it, they don't care who you are. They need storage space. And that's in some cases that's the same thing. Now they probably have a bit of a reputation that it's nice, it's maintained. That should actually help them long term with vacancy and things like that. And even long term marketability, if Alan never did sell, it would help because he maintains it well. But it doesn't really change the fact that these are apartment complexes. They just happen to have older folks that get to live here, and these are individual units with garages, and these are 3-story walk-ups. So you have a lot to say, probably. I saw you taking notes.
Yeah,
so.
I took a few notes. So Josh and I are really a lot alike, because I was a numbers guy my whole life, and he likes to dig into the numbers, and we can dig into numbers and we can dig into numbers, but at the end of the day, what we're really looking at is fairness and equity and parity and et cetera, when we're talking about how do we assess people, because we're supposed to assess them based on the way the law says. I warned you that when he started his rebuttal, it was going to be market. And I'll just remind him and you that the Supreme Court has already said when there's not a ready market and transactions on record to establish a market, we are not using the market. We are using the use as it relates to this taxpayer, which basically relates to their income. And that is step one. So first of all, doing that, you're going to be lower with cost. Income will be lower than the cost method as long as the income method is applied properly, which has been the case all across the state of Indiana, except in this county. So I would just give you that little caveat. And I'll back up the fact that I think his vision of how to approach the income value is wrong because of what he said. He says, he's not going to like what I say this, but this is what I'm going to say. You're supposed to take the lowest of the three values, but they're all the same. That doesn't make sense. If you're gonna cross-pollinate each method with each other, you're not doing what the law says, which is do a market analysis, do an income approach, do a cost approach. Figure out which one's the lowest, that's what the taxpayer gets. If I keep cheating and looking on the other person's paper to get to their number, I haven't done the basic analysis that the statute requires us to do, which is do each method separately, independently of each other. Nowhere does it say blend the three methods. If it said that, then he would be 100% right. Nowhere does it say that. It says the exact opposite. Do each of the three methods and give the lowest lowest value to the taxpayer. That's what the law says. So all of this stuff about national averages and national market activity and all of this stuff doesn't make any sense or make any difference Because the state of Indiana says that's not our system. We're not a market-based system. We are a system based on the formulas that we will delegate to the DLGF to figure out. And that is the process that we complied with. He referenced this IAAO form statement that said all the cap rates are going to be the same. Well, I see that from 2012. There's a, I don't know if it was, I don't know what that was exactly, if it was like a handout or a seminar, I don't know what it was. But I see that. But again, we go back to the point. IAAO is not the agency designated to determine values in the state of Indiana. The DLGF is. And the DGLF says, you can look at pieces like IAO for guidance, for filling in the blanks on what you don't understand, which is what I said earlier. But it doesn't say IAO trumps the state law, which the state law says 3 separate methods, the lowest one goes. So those are really issues. And the other thing is the in use. I have a strong disagreement with Josh when he says, well, in use doesn't really matter, or in use doesn't really mean anything because it's all back to the market anyway. Again, the legislature could make this a lot easier by just saying market value, appraisal value, national average, COSAR cap rates. They could do that with a stroke of a pen, and then we'd all know exactly what we're doing, which is what he's proposing to get us to a market rate. But that's not what the law tells us to do. And the in-use is important. And, I disagree. We're not saying that we have a swimming pool, therefore we're different. We're saying there's no investment probably other than ours in the state of Indiana that's going to provide the 4 units that we provide. And I think that's a difference. Granted, you could value them on the rent, which I agree, which he made that point. Ultimately, it boils down to a cash flow. But the other part of in-use is we're not building these for inventory to sell. We are building these to hold, and we've demonstrated that through our history of, Alan would say 52 years, you could say 30 years, you could say whatever. But the bottom line is we've demonstrated that we are not in the business of caring what the market says these things are worth. We're interested in providing good housing and a reasonable return for our investors. And if we're going to say, well, Alan, you might want to have your rents a certain way, you might want to pay your investors a certain way, but we're going to tax you like you're the guy from New York City who's going to buy it for $20 million. That's not using in use because we're not selling it for $20 million. Now someday, I don't see this happening, but if we did sell it for $20 million, he's got a knockdown dead argument to make that new guy pay $20 million because he paid $20 million. But until then, the Supreme Court says, we're going to look at what is this taxpayer doing with the property, how are they using the property, how does it affect them, and then we're going to use the 3 approaches. And I agree sales is a waste of time. I think cost is a waste of time most of the places we go, because at the end of the day, what are we getting out of it? We're not hiding anything. We're showing you what we get out of it. We're showing you what our expenses are. You're seeing the project. So ultimately, it should be income-based. I don't think he disagrees with that. He's willing to do the income approach, but he's going to apply, again, a market cap rate instead of allowing us to do what the Department of Local Government Finance says, which is build your cap rate. 2% to recapture your taxes, 2.5% to recapture the fact that this has a 40-year life, and then figuring out what your interest rate is and what your return on investment is, blend that, and it gives you a rate. Is 12.9 the right number? Listen, all of this stuff is subject to scrutiny or adjustment, but is 12.9 the number? Probably not. Is 8 or 7.6 the number? Probably not. And it's somewhere in the middle. And what I can tell you from experiences, and this is probably irrelevant to you in this setting, but as I said at my beginning, nobody has pushed the rate on us of under 10%. Nobody. I mean, that's always their opening salvo. Oh, cap rates are 4%. Yeah, by the time we're done discussing it, it's 10, it's 10.5, it's 11. Because that's the reality. If you want to believe that the cap rate is really 7%, and again, I'll talk about that in just a second too, but if you really want to believe that the cap rate is 7%, you'd have to believe that if someone had, say, 10, 15, $20 million, they would rather put that money in this apartment and have the maintenance, the tenant issues, the legal issues, the environmental issues, the real estate tax issues for a 7% return when they could get a CD at 5%. It doesn't make sense. No one's doing that. No one's gonna buy that. And that doesn't even count, like, if you had to borrow money to cover that investment, or if you had replacement, or if you had taxes that you have to pay out of that cap rate. So all I can say is, you know, we'll never agree. I'm pretty convinced we'll never agree.
I agree with him. We'll never agree.
We arm wrestled in his office for
See, look at that. We
a
can
long
agree on
time.
something.
So I heard something kind of recently. I heard something that I would agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong. But that's kind of snarky, and I don't really mean it like that. So that's the issue with the cap rates. I mean, if I and you know, it all bears out. You know, it all bears out. Like when we back to my initial discussion, when we looked at Quail Ridge starting the year, it was the highest valued property across the similar properties that we have across the state. On top of that, we're looking at a 33% increase, and that's hard. I mean, that is going to force us to push rents higher just to maintain the status quo. 30% is a lot. But ultimately, this is more art than science. You know, this is not this whole endeavor of trying to figure out what something's worth for tax purposes. And the state of Indiana, to their credit or detriment, doesn't make it any easier, because they don't give us just, in this case, it's just a market rate, just do an appraisal, just do the appraisal, or just figure it out. No, they say, what's the value for that taxpayer in the use that they have? And that's a lower number than these other numbers that are floating around. So I would just emphasize that, you know, we are following the cap building model. You want to scrutinize our rate of return. You want to scrutinize. I mean, I'll show you what the loan is on the property if you want to see what the interest rate is. We weight it for that. So much is at this percentage because that's what our loan is. So much is this percentage because that's what our investors expect. 2% for tax, 2.5% for recapture. That's all that goes into this number. It's not that complicated. And it gets, everyone acknowledges it gets you to over 10%. And no one has said that the DGLF build process isn't valid. And the case law says that we're not limited to a market rate. Oh, and that's what I wanted to say. I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I'll just say, I would be really interested to know how COSAR and all these other entities come up with these market rates. Because this is what I suspect happens. They check the listings, they see what sells, they know the price, because it's all disclosed. Then somebody in the office calls the company and says, how much were you making every year? What do you think they told them? You think they told them a big high number of what they were making, or you think they told them this teeny little number of what they were making? Which winds up giving them a low cap rate, which then makes the deal look like it was fantastic. I don't have any evidence of that. I'm just saying, in my experience, if I ever asked somebody how much money they made in my profession, in my capacity as a tax consultant or a tax attorney or a tax accountant, everyone was always pushing the lowest number. They were always pushing the lowest number. So I really find it hard to believe that those numbers are really accurate. I really find it hard to believe, or on the flip side, even if those numbers are accurate, it's to what he said, which is someone is coming in and they're paying way more than something's worth. And why are they doing that? Because they want the depreciation to take off other investments that they have, right? So they're going to depreciate the heck out of it right away. And they say, well, that's okay. I'll raise rents, I'll cut expenses, and this thing will make that much money. And what does that do for the community? Is that good for the community? If we have people who are going to raise everybody's rents and cut everybody's maintenance and then let the place go to heck, I think we've seen that happen in different environments. So, you know, that's why this market cap rate is not something that I'm a big fan of, in addition to the fact I think it overvalues the properties. What would ultimately be the property in the event that one of these sold? I guess, as the Supreme Court would say, that's yet to be seen because they're not sold. And no one's got them for sale, and no one's selling them. And yes, you might find an apartment, or you might find a duplex, or you might find a this, but it's a little different to find someone to buy a project that's worth a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars, than it is to find someone to buy a 6-flat or even an apartment building or whatever. So anyway, I don't know that there's real much more banter to go back and forth. Answer any other questions anybody has, but other than that, those were the points I wanted to reemphasize.
I did have a couple questions for Josh. Right from the beginning, the cap rates. How are they so different county to county then?
Well, first of all, they aren't different in my counties. Keep
Okay.
that in mind. They are even a little different in Nexus counties, and I know Keith did work with one of my coworkers in Madison, maybe?
Yes,
We were in
correct.
Madison? Yeah, they got a complex in, what, Elwood or Anderson? or-
It's called Elwood.
So in Elwood, yeah. And I can tell you that a lot of times it is, you know, the DLGF has always used a fun phrase that says, deference is given to local control, right? So that assessor might have said, Larry, that's the guy's name who works with me, that's fine, deal, be done, right? Be done with it. He might have said, I don't want to go to PTABOA over it. That's the end. Like they might have settled for a 10.5%, 11%, 12%, whatever it was, right? I don't know. I can tell you that I started in my communities all the same. So you're going to see an 8% cap rate on what the conventional plus, the conventional high, depending on what the neighborhood was called, the market was called, on the income of 8%. In Whitley County, in Grant County, in Noble County, in LaGrange County. Now, I can't tell you what my coworker did in Steuben County or DeKalb County or Wells County, because I don't work those counties. But, you know, St. Joe County, I don't think they even have a vendor. I think they do it themselves, unless they've picked up a vendor in the last couple of years that I'm unaware of. Vision might be there now, I don't know. And so, to a degree, we also settle appeals like that you never see. The problem we run into is with apartments specifically. I will be honest. I have played pretty hardball on the fact that if the cost approaches are the lowest, if you bring me income and we have a reasonable cap rate discussion and it still stays basically where it is, like I have changed some. One tax rep, it was 8, and he brought in a thing that said 8.4, and it didn't make a difference, right? So in the end, cost was still cheaper. And so we stuck with cost. If there's some issues with the cost, which we've already talked about, if those things need to be changed and it equals a lower value, we're not going to argue that. If the cost is the lowest and it is incorrect and it's corrected and it makes it lower, it is what it is. So yeah, that's kind of the answer. Is every county stands alone. I can tell you that a bunch of Nexus counties, though, are standing in. And I'm not the worst because I don't live in the most expensive areas. When you get into the donut around Marion, we have a couple of counties there, and their going in cap rates are 4.5%. And it's insane, but it's 4.5% because there's multiple publications that in these really highly desirable areas, 8% is too high. You know what I mean? And it doesn't make sense to us either because there's no money to be made at that. I think that's the first thing Keith was saying. There's no money to be made at a 5% cap rate, no matter where you are. If you're truly buying something at a 5%, there has to be some other motivation. The problem we're into, and I'll speak just, I don't want to take up any more time. I did make some quick notes though. The biggest thing we disagree on is that while each method stands alone, some methods would not be able to be done without looking at the other methods. I mean, that's just what it comes down to, is to do an income approach in this case. You can say, well, you can't look at the cost and you can't look at the market, but even though the DLGF in level 2 has a couple pages on band of investments, if you look at the next 2 pages and examples, it's direct capitalization. That's what this is. So CoStar does direct capitalization. I can't speak to how much they research. They pay a lot of people a lot of money to research all of these sales. Every single one of these sales has a research person that you could email on it to ask them if you wanted to get into that. I will tell you that usually the thing that I get argued from is this page, and that is that CoStar, they want to take the CoStar rate of like 8.4, like the one tax rep had for Marion County, and he wanted to add 2% to it and make it 10.4. I said, the problem is CoStar is building that in. So Indiana is unique in the fact that we take out the real estate taxes and add in the tax rate, okay? So the overall rate that is referred to in my document and in his band of investments is part of building the rate. But in Indiana, we exclude the taxes, and we've done that on his expenses, right? We have excluded taxes, and we would add back in a rate. But investors don't do that. Investors have an NOI and a price, and they determine the price, and it spits out a cap rate. And they don't stop and say, well, should we exclude this as an expense? Is it proper to, so CoStar and Marcus and Milchamp and all these other publications that publish cap rates are investor products. They're not assessor products. They're investor products. So if Alan wanted to go buy another complex, he wouldn't do something specific to Indiana necessarily if he was trying to find comps. He would look at what they go for on the market, right? Similar to what a realtor does. A realtor goes out and says, okay, I know you want $250 for your place, but here's the comps. Like, I looked up the houses in your neighborhood or your area or similar, and I think we should start it at $227, and hopefully you can get $220, right? So it's the same thing when you're buying multi-million-dollar real estate, right? Somebody's got to do some due diligence. CoStar is trying to provide an easy access to due diligence, and so this is just a financial page for the market in the area. And I usually include this just so you can see that CoStar is including real estate taxes. That's why their rates are, they're like an overall rate. So I just wanted to mention that. I will mention that while this document I sent is not, you can't read all this. This comes from the actual teaching guide for IAAO 102, Income Approach to Value. It is the class that we're still teaching assessors today. This actually came from Andrew, one of my coworkers, a certified instructor for IAAO. And I will agree with Keith that the IAAO is not the state of Indiana. The problem is the state of Indiana uses almost the IAAO guidelines exclusively. And so while they have a piece in the law that says cap rates, developed, they have some words in there, they also teach in their own level 2 on the income approach. They teach both methods. They talk about the band of investments, and they talk about direct capitalization, which direct capitalization is just income. It's IRV, right? There's an income, there's a rate, and there's a value. And so you can flip those numbers around and divide or multiply to get any of them. If you have 2 of those, you can find the third one. So in this case, the rate is what we're looking for. And if we have the income and we have the value, we can get a rate. And so I won't deny that if there's enough research, maybe you can find something in the CoStar data that they're lying about their income. But I think they're actually surveying and getting their income. Just like I have income for lots of apartments that have turned in their income, the assessors has a database of what income is, right? CoStar's doing the same thing at the investor level, at the buyer and seller. They're probably talking to both the buyer and the seller, and they're trying to determine if they have actual profit and expense statements. And I don't work for CoStar, so I can't tell you for sure. But I can tell you that the rates are so vastly different that it would be hard to explain with an anomaly of someone just saying they make less money than they do and the rate's too high. So, I mean, we're very far apart on our rates. We're not even close. So, that's, I'll kind of finish up with just saying, just like we talked about with the cost approach, retail versus actual, because they build their own places and they have some different actual costs. I think that really is the difference here. While the state says do all 3 approaches and use the lowest, that doesn't supersede the fact that assessors are required to assess at market value. They are required to assess market value in use. And the difference between him and I say this is an apartment complex. The in-use clause says I have to value him as an apartment complex. I can't value him as something else. The use of this property is apartments. It's an income-producing property that rent out residential units. I have to value him as that. I can't value him as something else. So, and that is something that we are more than happy to argue all the way to the top of this system, because they've already determined that at the next level. The in-use clause that Indiana has done does not mean that someone is entitled to an individual assessment because they have some special circumstance. The in-use is all about, are you valuing it based on its use? And its use is apartments. So that's all I'll speak to that. So I think I've tried to clear up everything. We're back to cost. I think that's where we're at. There's a lot of things that you got that if you want more information, he referred to case law. You might be like, present the case law. Like, you know what I mean? Give us the actual law you're talking about that speaks to this or that. I think a lot of the stuff, though, is just his methodology versus mine is very different. We disagree on some things. So.
And my second question was, I was confused when you said whether you do whatever valuation, they all end up being the same. So why would you bother doing all three to see which is the lowest?
Because some folks lobbied the state to get up their own law. So, I mean, this is legislators who are passing laws that don't understand real estate and valuation. And he might disagree with that, but the fact is, and I will say in a vacuum, because it's never going to come out exactly the same. But the fact is part of the cost, which is typically the lowest, derives its depreciation from the market. So therefore, if it was perfect, it would have the same value as the other ones. The income produces its market value, and I know I keep using market value, he doesn't like, he wants me to put in use in there. But an apartment creates its assessed value then, which is market value in use, if it's based on income, from market rents, market expenses, and market cap rates. Now, what we tend to get to, because this is how they start to change from being a perfect 1-1-1, right? Everything's not equal because market rent might be $1,200 for a unit and they're getting $1,150. And we don't really go through and say, prove to me why you're spending you're getting $50 less, right? You know what I mean? We there does produce some, but they won't be vastly different. I mean, that even goes back to this document that talks about how to develop rates. They're saying they should be equal or very similar. So one method, band of investments, might come up with a rate of 10.25. A direct capitalization, if the band of investment has all the correct components in it for the market, would produce something that is 10.22, 10.28, 10.19. It's not going to produce something that's 8.4. It's not going to produce a 14.10, 0.2.1. So it's not going to produce those types of numbers because that just tells me something's wrong on one side or the other. One of those two things can't be the same. They can't both be right and be 40% different, right? They can't both be right in the market. And again, this is going to be the biggest contention is the county argues that there is still law on the books that we are supposed to assess property at the right value. Then they came up with this law that said, we want you to do all three approaches. And that law stemmed from some apartment owners who had their values up a lot in a county, and the county refused to even really deal with their income. Like they were saying, too bad, we're not even going to look at it, right? And so they said, we need to stop this huge increase in our values because they were going to market, they were going to sales. They were using sales, and sales is the highest. Everyone knows it's the highest, which is interesting. I say they're all the same, but it's the highest, and that's only because we have this notion that to really get into the sales, to do it right, we would have to look at all the minutia and say, what else is going on in that sale? What else is included? Do we need to exclude personal property for appliances? Do they have other things going on? And so most people punt that. But the real fact is if an apartment complex sold, you can back into an income approach that proves that, whatever its cap rate was. A good example is in Marion County, I had a property that sold in 2022 for $9.2 million. The tax rep wanted to use a cap rate of 10.5. The actual cap rate when they bought it was 5.5. And the taxpayer admitted that. They said, we also bought it what we believe is the peak of the market. We think it's worth less. We would lose money if we sold it today. And we didn't disagree with them. The problem is they wanted $4 million, and we said no. Right? I mean, that makes sense, right? You can't buy something unless something dramatically happened. You can't buy it for $9 million. And the market in general has not tanked. and then say it's only worth, 45% of that. So we had to work it out, right? And in the end, interestingly enough, it was a cost issue that we worked out, and it lowered it slightly from 6.1 to 5.9. Still way under their market value, but that's simply because counties are not going to chase the cost nearly as much as they're going to look at that income, because they know the cost is already going to be too low, because the cost tables are too low, because we can't use a market factor on it, because I can't put a neighborhood factor on it, because I'd have to take away all their depreciation. Like, think about that. To get this to the actual sales, I would have to grade them at a B, and I would have to take off all their depreciation, and I still wouldn't be there. You know what I mean? Possibly. I didn't do the math, right? And that's what you run into. So cost is, we've just kind of decided that if the cost is lower, we're not going to go around trying to say, well, let's make the effective age 2024. Now the cost is higher. There we go. You know what I mean? We just said, as long as it's fairly equal to the rest of what's going on in the county when it comes to the apartments, so we're just going to say that is what it is, and the cost is low, and that's the benefit to the taxpayer. It's the same thing with gross rent multipliers. Individuals come in and they say, well, I should get a gross rent multiplier because it equals a lower value. Not if the gross rent multiplier is right. The market value of a rental property is the market value of a single family rental is the market value of a single family rental. And if the gross rent multiplier is correct, it will equal what it would sell for. It's not a discount. It's just a different methodology. It's to try to prevent improved single family homes that are selling not as rentals from influencing the rental market. So you can develop a gross rent multiplier. But technically the sales that you use to develop the gross rent multiplier are sales of rental properties. So they would be market value, right? I emphatically disagree that this is a different method. It's the exact same concept. It's just got its own law. But the law is basically just telling us to use the lowest of the three approaches. But it doesn't say to knowingly underassess those properties because we don't like how much it raised the value or what it values it at. Because if that's the case, then why wouldn't we just make everything like an E-1 grade? We can make it the lowest possible value on the cost approach. I mean, there's a way to do that. We can make the cost super low. We can make the land worth $1,000 an acre, right? But that wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be the value. So the cost approach is probably the highest possible cost approach that it can be, with trying to be consistent for how it's actually built, with the land values being similar to the land values of the area, right? I mean, in theory, the right thing to do if you were trying to get it to market value would be to continue to raise the cost using modifiers, but we're not allowed to. That is in the law. We cannot do that. So.
Can I ask, which counties did you say you do this for?
I specifically work in LaGrange and Noble and Whitley and Grant.
So, just in response, and I don't know.
You looking for work, are you? I'm just
I
kidding.
don't know how much more we really want to go back and forth, but just to summarize, when Josh referenced the DGLF training manual, he acknowledged that what we did is in the manual. He said, there's another page that does it the way I'd rather do it, but he didn't say we did something that was inappropriate or not defensible. Josh, I think, made a reference that he knows the real estate market better than the legislatures do, and they're the ones that make these laws. And he probably does, I don't doubt that. But that's not the point. The point is the legislator makes the laws, and we follow and interpret the laws. And in my experience, this cross-pollination of the methodologies between each other is not something that I've faced anywhere else. So you might just be in a situation where you have like the most aggressive market-based valuation process in the state in these 4 counties. I don't know. It is definitely of the 6 that we deal with, because we never have these arguments. We never have people telling us that you can't build your cap rate, and your cap rate can only be the market rate, and we don't. This isn't something we ever have a discussion of. So I don't know what to tell you about that. You might be in a situation where you're just going to be making yourself uncompetitive, and that's the decision that you guys have to make. we stand by our representation that with a fair cap rate across, that we encounter across all the other communities that we do. Our communities are always similar. I don't know what these other counties are, that's why I asked. I mean, I don't have the whole 92 memorized. But, you know, we're always in kind of like the semi-rural kind of Collar County area, you know, where housing's needed. We don't have a lot of big buildings and that kind of thing. It's kind of like the county seat kind of counties are where we are. And so that's the experience that we've had, and that's our market. I mean, we're not looking to go downtown Indy, downtown Fort Wayne, downtown South Bend. We're not doing those projects. We're looking for where's there a farmer who has a good spot, who could have a development that would help the nearby community. That's our market. And in all the markets we're in, you know, we have these conversations and we don't really have problems. So, you know, ultimately you guys will decide what you'll decide, and, you know, we'll kind of go from there. But I do think that, and I can reference, you know, just in passing real quick, you know, the case of Stinson versus Tremus, where there was a big discussion about, oh, well, this has to be at market value, or is it the value of the use of the property that's in the hands of the owner as the owner uses it? That was such a case, and it's pretty clear to me as I read the cases and as I do the research that, and maybe I'll just finish with just one simple statement. Code section 6-1, I mean, hope I didn't write the citation down wrong, 6.1, or 6-1.1-31-6C says, with respect to assessment of real property, true tax value does not mean fair market value. Boom. It's statutory. It's not even a matter of interpretation. It's statutory. The Supreme Court has said it can be the same as market value, but it's not compelled to be the same as market value. Everything that he does to attack our analysis of what we think is fair and reasonable to get to a number everyone can live with is it's not market value. And if the county wants to take that argument to the next level, that's okay with me, because, you know, I'm okay with arguing against that, because I have never seen a case or any authority that says that. So, at any rate, we think the proper approach to value is an income approach with a reasonable cap rate based on the income that we actually produce at the property. That's basically the basis that has been for many, many years. The only reason costs came into this picture at all was because the county or the state restricted the county's flexibility in cost structure, which is the only reason that anything would even be close, that cost would ever even be close to the income number that we've had in the past. So, you know, our petition would be a reassessment based on a reasonable cap rate as we presented in our calculation, and that's it. I do thank you for all your time. I don't know if there's any other questions or comments.
I appreciate your time and all your information, Keith, and Josh, same with you.
I knew this would be a long one,
I would have
so.
expected no less out of you, by the way.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
But anyway, Mr. Chairman, just seeing a lot of this information for the first time today, hearing a lot of information and trying to absorb it all, I'd really like to table this and consider it at the next meeting whenever we decide to set it up. Possibly the one in January for the one commercial. Tied in
Okay.
with
Did you already
that.
set that?
And I will second that.
Okay. Did anybody have any other discussion or questions with Keith?
I don't know what I don't know at this
And
point.
it's my problem.
I guess, you know, I
And
was
we don't
just-
need to disagree in front of you anymore. I think we've
Yeah.
exhausted each other.
I
We're good.
didn't
Well-
mean to, you've obviously got some questions.
Well, some things going through my mind as you were speaking, Keith. I know earlier we talked about subjectivity versus objectivity in the previous situation. Obviously, there has to be some of that involved, but we've also talked about the state requiring, you know, being pretty stringent on how they do things. Keith, you mentioned you do business in 6 different counties, so apparently they do it a little differently than what we've been doing it here. So I guess I was just curious, besides the cap rate, I suppose that's one of the big ones. They apparently use the income approach. Was there anything else that, that was affecting in those counties that's different than what we're doing here?
No, everywhere where we've been, we always submit our appeals based on the income approach, and we build our cap rate just as we did. It's the attachment to our petition, is what we supply whenever we do an appeal.
Okay.
Like I said, history has shown us that obviously there is no market, but even if we tried to extrapolate to a market, it would be so unreliable. It's just not functional. And the cost method traditionally was way higher. So income has been the basis, and as we go through these, we do get pushback. We get debate on cap rate. Nobody likes, if we say 12%, nobody likes that. But I mean, in all honesty, no one's taken us below 10%. But that's really what it boils down to. And I think at the end of the day, and again, this is a credit to Josh, is that at the end of the day, I do think that most assessors are basically looking at it. We're looking to get a fair number everyone can live with. Like I said, the cap rate is like a dial that moves the number so much. You can tweak the cap rate a little bit, and then everybody gets to the number they want to get to. When you lock in on a cap rate of 8%, there's nowhere to go. And like I said, every percent is probably $1.25 million of value. So that's usually what we're kind of dickering with, and most of the time we don't dig into the weeds. I think Josh digs into the weeds more. That's
Sorry, I'm a digger.
Personality or his professionalism, and he gets credit for that. But I mean, I do fundamentally disagree with his version of market versus the way I read the law. The way he reads the law is the way market applies to it, and the way that the statute is carried out. I mean, I don't think the legislature could be more clear, because this debate has come up, and I mean, they literally came out and said, where true market value is not fair market value. The way you're going to do it is you're going to take the lowest of these three methods. They didn't say average them. They didn't say cross-pollinate them. They didn't say any of that. All those things they could have said. They're literally trying to say, we're not looking strictly at market, and you can use these three methods and give the taxpayer the lowest one, because at the end of the day, it's not about valuing every piece of property its maximum value, hypothetical value. It's about valuing it in a way that's reasonable and fair for the taxpayer, so that you have consistency and development and fairness and stable rents and all those other things. So that's what we do. We understand that taxes are going to trend up over time. I mean, we get that. I mean, we're not thinking that we're going to have, that's not to say we've never asked for a reduction, but we understand that taxes aren't going down to zero. They're going on a plane, but are they going to go like this? Is that the way we want the tax base to go? I don't think so. I think we want it to be somewhat trending and consistent and reasonable, so that everybody, so the community can do what it needs to do, and that we can, survive and function in our role. And, I think that the other takeaway is that, with our product, I mean, we do add to the tax base. I mean, you could have people come to town and build Section 8 housing, and that's not going to do you any good. I mean, we are in the market. We're not selling to those people. We're not building it and then selling it off to some investor who turns it into Section 8 housing. I mean, we are trying to help build your tax base. And so we need a little help in doing that by making it a reasonable assessment and a reasonable change in the assessment, so that we can go. A 30% increase is 33% increase is a big increase. I mean, it's a lot to swallow. I mean, everyone thinks, businesses have money, they can pay for whatever. Well, it's not really that easy, because we also have to pay banks, and we have to pay insurance. And I could go into a whole thing about what's happened in the insurance industry that's turned us topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
So we're always fighting, and we're always trying to work with the communities, and we do appreciate your time. And I don't mean to hog the microphone, but if there's any other questions you have, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, I appreciate that explanation. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor to table this. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can tell you that we will make sure that the hearing comes up, that you get notice.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are talking. I won't be here, unless I have to be here for the other one. But then we'll do that first, and I'll probably leave, so that I don't taint. I'm really careful about not allowing you to have a rebuttal, right? So I won't even speak. But then I think our goal will be to set that up in order that you'll know before taxes are due, right? Like, let's get that fixed so that you guys don't get to May. And if they were going to change something, now you had to pay a different tax bill, and then you got to get a corrected tax bill. So you know, January is it's too late to do January. We can do February.
Yeah,
if
probably
you want.
early
Yeah.
February, with having to give 30 days notice.
Again, you're welcome to come and
That's
it's a
yours.
public hearing, right? But,
I'm gonna take it.
No, it's fine, just give me the notice. and
yeah,
we'll check.
yeah.
So, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Keith.
you. Thank you, Keith.
Take care.
Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Keith. Nice to
Happy
meet you too.
holidays.
Good meeting you.
Nice project out
Thank
there.
you, we
by the way.
appreciate it.
Sorry to take up so much of your time.
Hey, that's
Whatever
what it's
time
all
it
about.
takes is whatever
Yeah,
time
we
it
did
takes.
we did the 2 hard ones.
Did a
Now,
nice
believe it or
job.
not, we have like 5 or 6 more.
Yeah.
That no one's here for.
No shows.
Well, thankfully.
We
I thought
We're
Josh was
always
buying
thankful when
lunch.
people show up because even I find out more
I
information
guess
when
it
people
is.
show up
Yeah.
than
Isn't
when
that
they
right,
just.
Josh?
What's that?
Aren't you buying lunch?
Yeah, Josh.
Am I buying it for you guys? That
Yeah.
might be a conflict of interest.
He said he's buying it for himself.
If it's under $25, I think it's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, can I just ask again, because I didn't catch everybody's name when I
Oh.
walked in. Just wanted to
Go ahead,
make a
Teresa.
note of who it is.
It's Teresa, and it's
Teresa.
T-R-E-A-S-A.
I bet she spells that.
And my
wrong.
last name is Sedaris. S is in Sam, I-D-E-R-I-S.
Jeff Walker.
Just like it sounds.
This is
Common,
easy.
common spelling.
Yeah. Greg, G-R-E-G, Fall, F-A-H-L.
Great, thank you so much again for your time.
Okay,
and
so this is.
thanks,
Thank you,
Josh,
Keith.
for all your help and,
Thank you.
have a nice
Thank
holiday.
You too.
Thank you,
You
Jeff. You too.
The rest of these are gonna go really fast in my
They will. I
Josh,
I know
don't argue.
everything's
Well-
on the record and stuff, and you're getting ready to ask me a question,
Yeah.
but my real question will be is, do we know, are there any of these that have changes that you need to tell them about? Okay.
No.
Mine, well, the one, when we get to All-American, we did make the small land change that needs to go
Yes,
into the
that
record.
one, yes.
So, you guys, I think what we'll do is she'll read it, and we'll mention that the taxpayer's not here, and then we're just gonna say, since this is kind of unofficially on the record, right, it's all recorded, that we're just gonna say no change, and there's been no evidence to the contrary, and any of these are all just, we're going through the motions basically, until we get to the very last one. Or you wanna do that first? You wanna just do that one first, and then we'll say about the little land change and ask them to make to make that official? Do All-American first?
Yeah, we can do
Okay.
that.
We're gonna do All-American Resort, little campground over at Blue Lake. Let's do that one first because there was a land change on that one. So you guys will actually have to vote to either agree with us or not agree with us, right? But after that, all of them have no additional evidence and we're asking for no change. So that might speed up the process.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, you'll have to read in each one. Yeah.
Okay, this is an administrative hearing being held on December 11th, 2024 in the Whitley County Government Center in the County Commissioner, County Council meeting room. This hearing is being recorded. This hearing is being conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as found in IC 6-1.1-1-1. This is for All American RV Resorts LLC, petition number 92-009-24-0-4-00001, parcel number 92-04-10-107.000-009. Property location 5453 North Blue Lake Road, Churubusco, Indiana. And we did make a small change for them due to a wetland certificate that was recorded after the appeal was filed. It was just recorded this year. So I did go ahead, it was 12 acres of the entire parcel acreage that we made a change to designate to wetlands area. That did lower their assessed value a little bit. Tax rep / owner on this property has not been back in touch with us. So we will go ahead and because of that being a recorded legal document, we did go ahead and make that change to the land for the taxpayer. Okay?
Okay. So other than that, there was no change, correct? Okay.
At the recommendation of the assessor, I move that we do approve the change of the
625.
12.625 acres into wetland area.
Okay, thank you. Is there
I will second.
Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Oops,
Okay.
grab that
Found another one you changed. I found Daily, they have a land change too. So let's do them next. Oh, no, let's do the defect next. Get all the commercial out of the way.
Confusing me.
Sorry.
Don't do that. It's a short trip for me. Okay,
So we're gonna look at the O'Reillys.
yes, we'll go
Next.
O'Reilly's. This is an administrative hearing being held on December 11th, 2024 in the Whitley County Government Center in the County Commissioner, County Council meeting room. This hearing is being recorded. This hearing is being conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as found in IC 6-1.1-1-1. This is for the O'Reilly Automotive Incorporated appeal. They filed the appeal. It was filed by Kevin Daughtery with Invoke Tax Partners. He is not an owner to the property, and proper procedures for them to file a POA or a, POA. And I emailed them, had correspondence with them that they would get that back to me, and they did not do that. This then becomes a defective appeal as marked, so we will just need to take a vote in the fact that this appeal, there's no change on the appeal cannot be heard, it's defective.
Okay.
I
Hearing-
will make a motion that the appeal is defective and that no change.
No change, okay, thank you.
I'll second it.
Second, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 You're experienced.
And then I did find that it looks like Daily did have a little land change because of some flooded area that Kim did make a change on that one. So let's make sure we do that one since it's a change.
Okay,
This is an administrative hearing being held on December 11th, 2024 in the Whitley County Government Center in the County Commissioner, County Council meeting room. This hearing is being recorded. This hearing is being conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as found in IC 6-1.1-1-1. This is for Teresa and Randy Daly, petition number 92-006-24-0-5-00001, parcel number 92-10-25-302-001, period, 000-006, property location of 9999 South 700 East .92 Roanoke, Indiana. They stated in their appeal that they had some area that was in a flood zone, and that is recognized on our GIS map when you turn on the hazard flood maps, and I was able to locate that area. For the total parcel acreage, we're looking at them having a total parcel acreage of 5 something.
.236.
Yes, and this comes back to about an acre of ground that is in an actual flood zone. So I did make that change, and that lowered their assessed value by about $15,000. So I'm just letting you know that's the only change then due to them noting that on the appeal.
Okay,
And you guys should be able to see that on the property record card in your file.
Yes,
If you want
yes.
to know exact
That
numbers
change
for
was
your
made.
motion or anything.
Yep.
Yep.
I'll make a motion that we approve the change of approximately 1 acre to the flood zone, reducing their assessed value by about $15,000.
okay, thank you.
I will
And
second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, we do have a withdrawal that received a call this morning from William Negley, and he is here in town. This is an administrative hearing being held on December 11th, 2024 in the Whitley County Government Center in the County Commissioner, County Council meeting room. This hearing is being recorded. This hearing is being conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as found in IC 6-1.1-1-1. Petitioner William and Doreen Negley, petition number 92-004-24-0-5- 00010, parcel number 92-06-10-565-032, period, 000-004. Property location 310 North Shinneman Drive in Columbia City, Indiana. And there was no change on this due to the withdrawal.
So we need to vote on
Yeah, we
that since
did.
it was a withdrawal though?
I don't think so. I don't- Yeah, I'm not,
No.
yeah.
All right.
Just
I didn't
information.
wanna
Just
I didn't want to
information,
interrupt,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm surprised we didn't do anything for this, Josh.
Okay, so that leaves us with
I got three more in front of me. Does that sound
Three,
about
yeah.
right?
3.
So just pick one, yeah. Yeah, we're getting close, though.
Did you hear from any of the remaining residential applicants?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we need to vote on them separately
I'm
or?
gonna do them here, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if we
Yep.
could clump them together.
I just asked.
Well, you can clump them together if you already know if you already know what you're going to do on them. But she still has to read the script,
Okay.
and then she would have to like separate in the middle of the script each parcel, and then you guys would still have to have 3 votes.
I think at last year's hearing that we established a precedent that if the applicants didn't make contact for any reason and didn't show up, that they were automatically denied any
Correct. We still have to read that into the
Yeah.
record, and you'll still have to make a vote. And that's what I'm saying. So for the purpose of these last 3, she could be like, go through this script and say, the first parcel that you'll be voting on is such and such, the second parcel is such, and then she
Sure.
can finish the script. Here is the board, here is
Yeah.
Josh, here's
Yeah.
whoever, right? And then you can make your
So
motion
not
each
knowing
at a
exactly
time.
what the other 2 are planning on voting.
Yeah, well, you
we
still have to
probably
vote,
do it
yeah.
individually.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah. I kind of have
Okay.
a feeling I know what the other ones are.
Well, I got a good feeling too.
It almost took longer to explain that if we just read it. So just let's burn through them.
This is an administrative hearing being held on December 11th, 2024 in the Whitley County Government Center in the County Commissioner, County Council meeting room. This hearing is being recorded. This hearing is being conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as found in IC 6-1.1-1-1. First one is going to be Daniel J. Simon, petition number 92-009-20-20-5-00004, parcel number 92-04-10-253-016, period, 000-009. Property location of 5139 Northeast Drive, Cherubusco, Indiana. I have not had any correspondence back from Daniel at all since he's filed the appeal. I've reached out a couple times, wanted to talk over the comp analysis, which he was sent, and I have not had any correspondence back.
I drove up there and went by the property, and compared to the assessed valuation, I felt it was
Yeah.
no change needed.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Should we do the motion on that one now, or are you going to read the other 2?
No, let's go ahead and do the
Okay.
motion. Yeah.
I would like to make a motion of no change.
No change, thank you. A second?
You can second these if you'd like.
I can? I didn't think I could.
Just because you're chair.
I didn't, oh, can I? Okay.
I'll second it.
All those in favor of no change? Aye, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
You guys are getting so good at it, though.
We don't want to hog it all.
Robert's rules, huh? Never really did study those 2, huh?
This is an administrative hearing being held on December 11th, 2024 in the Whitley County Government Center in the Commissioner, County Council meeting room. This hearing is being recorded. This hearing is being conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as found in IC 6-1.1-1-1. The appeal for Dodie Timbrook, petition number 92-014-24-0-5-00003, parcel number 92-05-07-407-282, period 900-014, property location of 407 South Pumpkin Ridge Court in Kansas City, Indiana. Dodie has appealed before, and she has withdrawn. I reached out to her and sent a comp analysis as well and indicated we would not be able to make any change due to the sales out in Eagle Glen, and I have not heard anything back from her as well.
I'd like to make a motion that there be no change.
Okay, I'll second that motion. All those in favor of no change, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm just curious, is there a house out there that built in 2005 that the roof would be so bad it can't be sold? Like, that was her argument originally. It's like, it needs a roof or it can't be sold. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any of that bad out there.
20
but-
years
Yeah.
old.
I built
I went out there.
out there in 2000 and I just replaced my roof.
Yeah, so 5 years later,
Yeah.
yeah, so, yeah, depends on
It could be.
what shingles they put on. or
Yes,
whatever the
could have
case
been.
is, yeah.
I went out by that one too and pulled some comps. I think her square foot price was $2 or $3 below the ones I pulled.
Yeah.
So, looked okay.
You got left here, Schmidt.
Last one.
Save the best for last.
This is an
I was gonna have
administrative
some fun
hearing
with
being
him.
held on December 11th, 2024 in the Whitley County Government Center in the County Commissioner County Council Meeting Room. This hearing is being recorded. The hearing is being conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as found in IC 6-1.1-1-1. This appeal is for Stephen and Deborah Schmidt, petition number 92-04-24-0-5-00004. Parcel number 92-06-02-537-131, period 002-004. Property location 738 South Columbia Parkway in Columbia City, Indiana. I have not had any correspondence back from either owner since email correspondence with comps sent, nothing back from them.
Before a motion, I do have just one question on that, because it was the land value that he was appealing. And I noticed on all the villas or condos up there that they had a land value of $1,700 in the past, and all of them were bumped this year to $24,000, I think, which seems fair to me based off of land values. But my question is, why this year?
Yeah, if you didn't ask, I was gonna, well, I can't tell you why this year. I think a lot of that just comes down to, so these condo land values are almost completely arbitrary. It's just adding a component to the land to then have the improvements less. Because if not, it's all gonna be in the improvements. And there are some condo complexes that don't have 17, they have 0. In the state of Indiana, some assessors choose to have no land value on the condo itself, and all the value that it sells for is in the improvements. So again, this just goes back to, do we want to have a factor of 1.69 or do we want a factor of 2.87, right? Like it would all just go in there. So probably as that factor kept getting higher, so Mike does the trending on these, and so it was probably just a component of saying, okay, let's attribute a percentage of the current sale prices to the land in order to try to control that neighborhood factor. Because if not, it's all gonna be in the improvements. The values are all gonna be the same, especially because they all have the same land value, right?
Yeah.
So it makes the exact same contributory value as a percentage.
But that
So-
land value, we built those units, and the land is not owned by the owners of the property except for under the foundation. The association should be getting the charge.
Yeah, so this isn't an association issue at all, right? They have their own assessment and may or may not have a
When
value.
it went from that to 24,000, that is way too much, because
Okay,
only under the slab or the crawl is what's owned by the owner of those.
okay.
And they're not condos, they've been called that.
Well,
Everybody calls them that, and they aren't. condos, and if they were condos, it would be assessed differently, but they aren't.
What are
That
they?
association, well, it was a planned unit development when we built it.
Okay.
And
I didn't think that we had PUDs in
So-
any of our ordinances.
well, that's come up over and over. Eagle Glen, they call those condos because that's the way the county has them assessed. They are villas, they are not condos. The appraiser calls every time, you know, about the Horizontal Property Act and everything that goes with it.
Sure.
With that, and they aren't, but they said that's how the county has them classified, so that's what we have to go by. So it's a battle every time we sell one of those because.
Yeah, and
they're
out
not
there
classified.
in that area, whether it's a true condo or not, I agree. If they just own the land underneath it, that's fine. But that land value underneath it is actually arbitrary to the overall assessment. You can make it a 0 or you can make it 100,000,
Yeah.
and the value of the improvement would just change accordingly.
But the reason they were
So-
so low is because it was only that small part under the slab. The balance is in the Shores of Columbia Association. They pay the taxes for the
So
common
is
areas.
that how it's set up?
Yeah, that's how it is.
Okay.
The association gets the bill for the remainder of the other area of the
Right.
ground of the parcel.
They probably
So,
really
yeah.
got hit. Did the
So-
association get nailed pretty hard?
No,
No, that
no,
didn't change.
no.
No, their ground did
Because
not change.
because most of the value of that ground is actually built into the condo also, or the unit. I don't know. I don't want to call it condo if it's not a condo, but the
Thing is, we don't have a property, state doesn't recognize a property class code for a villa.
Yeah.
So the closest that we have for property class recognition is going to be that 550, which is for a
Yeah,
condo.
and that really screws up the appraisal.
right, and without data,
And the
it
lending.
is difficult because I could even argue that says, you know, the value of the land underneath that villa is exponentially higher than it might be for the land underneath a single-family dwelling that owns the acre around it, right? Because I have to have that piece, or I don't have my villa. It's it's one of those things of it's the diminishing return on it actually shoots the value even higher if you could even figure out what it's worth, right? I mean, because you're not going to sell the land underneath a villa without the villa, so all of our sales are going to be the bundle of rights, right? And that's what you run into with condos a lot of times, just to speed this up and be done. But in theory, when you buy a condo, you're buying not just the sticks and the bricks inside the walls or whatever the case might be, and the land underneath it, you're also buying a bundle of rights. So if your condo complex has a pool or it's lakeshore and has docks, you're buying the right. When you buy the condo, you don't individually own the waterfront, but you're buying the right to use it. And so if I pay $200,000 for my condo, what's the real breakdown? Well, maybe the building's worth 120 and the land is worth 10 and the bundle of rights is actually worth 70,000 because it's lakefront in this case, right? So in the end though, the goal is the condo assessed at 200,000, right? And so hopefully with this one, even though the land has increased, it was probably done, I would have to ask Mike if you really want to know. It's probably just a percentage. He probably went through and said, okay, let's assign 20% of value to the land under the condo, and that'll give me a remainder value to trend with the factor. So hopefully when we look at these, and I think a lot of them are included in here, hopefully when we look at them, if there's any recent sales, his doesn't have a recent sale, but I do know the Haywood is the second card in here, sold in 23 for 173.
The one right next door to Steve.
Right next
sold.
door just sold
The
this year.
attached unit sold for, all these assessments are under the market value, so he has no argument on that.
Well,
Yeah, so the overall
But,
value.
none of them's out of line. He's actually a little couple, $3.76 below the average. of
You got the exact math right there.
3, 4, 5, 6. No, I just did them by hand. 7, 8 or 9 of them in the surrounding area there, so.
Yeah, and
But the
so
land thing, they've done something, the reason it's low is because it was only that under the slab, which isn't very much. Even the porches or decks or
Yeah.
anything, it's not,
see,
it's in
I
the
was
association.
under the impression that it was actually half of the lot.
No,
No.
those
then the other
aren't.
unit-
Now, the villas are, but they call those condos like at Eagle Glen.
Yeah.
And I said, we did that subdivision, I know.
think that's just
they're not
semantics.
condos, but there's so many villas, you'd think the state would have developed a classification because
Sounds like a real estate.
it's
job.
bad. It's a nightmare. Every time one sells, they call up.
Yeah, I just took.
Well,
a
this
call
is
the
a
other
condo.
day.
Yeah.
Right, because when you do have a true condo, you have the horizontal
Yeah.
regime document that
Yeah.
explains exactly
So
what
they
your
want all
percent
that
interest
stuff.
is and all that kind of stuff.
They want all
Yeah.
that, so we don't have that. It's not a condo. It's a villa.
Well, and
We
just so you know,
built-
Kim, they don't have to be condo. We can call them 510s. You know what I mean? It's
Well,
just,
if we wanna put them
yeah.
on as a 510, I can do that. but
Well,
there's
like
Places-
would that
That's
save
gonna-
your industry a headache if we just
Yes,
called them
it would,
single family?
because
Yeah.
The appraiser now has
Or-
to go, because they call it a condo, they have to treat it that way.
Yeah,
So
we
it
can-
causes them big
Yeah, people
problems.
should stop using the assessor as legal documents. We just assess, you know what I mean? It's like, holy cow. What if I called it an airport? Would they always be having to check with the FAA?
Well, then the underwriters, you know,
Yeah.
they're all over them if it's not.
Honestly, I didn't realize it was a big deal.
You guys will have a we
is a
got
big
into a
deal.
conversation here, but you do have
Okay.
a vote on this one. So.
Okay.
I make a motion to no change.
No change?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I will tell you that this is one thing that I stay out of a number of times, not here, but in LaGrange County, a lot of times what I'll get is the assessor calls me and the realtor or someone similar will be like, can you go out and you have this on as a mobile home? Can you go out and verify it's a mobile home?
Oh. They
And
want you to do the
and
engineer's work.
And I literally tell them, no, I won't. Because
Right.
I'm not going to be responsible if you sell a mobile home and call it a manufactured home.
Right.
I'm not in this. The bank can decide what they want to loan on based on their in-house experts. They should go to the property.
They require an engineer to go out and write a report, not a home inspector, but a regular.
Yeah, because they'll be like, you have this on
Write a
as a
report
mobile
for the wheels
home.
and
We want you to
tires.
change it to a manufactured home. And I'm like, no, refuse. Now, I will make a note that next time we do reassessment, can we get in and see if it's got a metal frame, does it have a tag? But I am not getting involved in your financial decisions. I'm not doing, nope, I'm not liable for that.
You'd be
So-
surprised at the calls that we feel.
I can imagine.
And I even try to tell that to
Because,
appraisers and stuff, like, the assessors are not the end all, don't listen to us, go out and get your own expert.
Yeah.
You be the expert, you tell me what it
And
is.
they don't know the difference in a modular and a manufactured home.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
they call manufactured homes modulars.
Oh,
Vice versa.
land order. We have one more thing. I have a copy of the land order for you.
I got it right here.
You got it right there. Good. Okay, so you guys remember from previous years, you do not have to approve it. You don't have to do anything except for acknowledge the receipt. This is the 2024.
We fanned it last time.
Yeah, but you can look through
We're
all that you
being- we're being-
want. I can get you your own PDF copy if you really want to look through all the land rates. Yeah, so this is the 2024, so I know we're almost done with that year, but this is our first hearing. So we present it to you that the PTABOA is now presented with the 2024 land order as accordance with law.
Do you want to look at that?
I know where I
Yes,
get
everybody
to.
really wants to look at it.
Commit it to memory.
Okay.
So someone needs to acknowledge that
I
officially.
move that we acknowledge receipt
Thank you.
of the 2024 land order.
I'll second that. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, well, folks, if you hurry, you're out of the building before noon. And we will have one that you guys, again, I will hear the nursing home appeal, and then I
If you
will,
can settle it.
I will leave you, because I don't want, if Keith is not here, I definitely don't want you guys to even think about asking me a question. You guys have your.
Oh, really?
evidence. Oh, yeah, I would,
You have to have
I would
this.
ethically feel bad if I started talking about
Yeah.
that appeal without him here.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, without him here, yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So
We can do it though, right?
Yeah, you guys can get through all that evidence, and hopefully by the time it rolls around, you guys have questions for each other, or
Thank you.
Yeah.
you guys have opinions, you'll try to convince each other of whatever, right? So that's really what this tabling is for, is, so hopefully over the next month or so, you've kind of figured out what you want to do, and then you guys can, like a jury, convince who's right? So,
And I will get with you on how things look for you the beginning of February. We get a hearing. The other appeal is the nursing home down in southeast part of Jefferson. And I explained to them, because of the process and what's involved with giving 30-day notice, doing legal publication for another hearing, all the copies that is involved and everything, we wanna dial in a date that we know that they are definitely gonna be able to be here,
Yeah.
because obviously we're
You're
gonna
gonna
call.
have to advertise again. too.
Yeah, we gotta advertise, we've gotta have all of you in, and so because that's an expense, I'm trying to be mindful of the fact of our taxpayer
Yeah.
dollars with all the copying and the cost that's
Yeah.
involved with these appeal
Let's not have that
hearings.
delayed again, right?
Does
So,
that,
yeah.
does that same situation exist that did last time? About the investor thing?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's their argument
Oh,
for
okay.
this as well. I mean, it's a separate entity inside an entity
Yeah.
that operates the actual nursing home in
Yeah.
place of the actual owner of the property.
So nothing's different than it was last time?
No, that was a not-for-profit status though on that one. That was different for
Oh.
the not-for-profit that
Okay.
we denied at that time because they are not owned, operated, and occupied.
It should just be evaluation,
Yeah.
and, you know, full disclosure, I've sent him emails and got nothing. There's a very good possibility this can be settled if I can just get,
Oh.
again, like income, there's no
Yeah.
special law on this one, it might just be, send me your income, let's figure it out, let's
Yeah.
negotiate on a cap, figure out a cap
Yeah.
rate that's correct for the market, and it might produce a lower value, and it'll go away. And then all you'll have is your discussion and decision to deal with in the future.
Okay.
Right?
I'll
I
let
move we
you-
adjourn. Oh,
No.
Move we
That's
adjourn.
what I was just gonna say.
There's no second.
there's no second.
Denied.
Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
All those
I
in
doubt I'll
favor?
see you again, so have a Merry Christmas.
Oh, thank
Happy
you,
holidays.
You too,
too.
Josh. Did you get skinnier? You look like you lost a whole bunch of weight.
I did.
You did?
I did. I went carnivore.
Wow.
So all I eat is animal